When did you win by faking it until you made it? When I got my first construction job, I had to go buy a bunch of gear. Carhartts, which are heavy work pants, steel-toe boots, and a bunch of hand tools. The first thing I did when I got home was take the pants out to the garage and drag them through the dirt on the floor, stomp on them, rub some oil on them, and pull out a few threads. The steel toes got hit with a shovel and dirtied up, and the tools got their handles scraped and dirtied. I showed up on site with two other guys who looked like they were mannequins from the store. They got razzed for their shiny new gear, and they thought I knew what I was doing. Suckers. I went to Cheonan World Dance Festival in Korea, which includes a massive parade down the main street of the city. The best spot I could get where I could actually see was right at the end of the parade behind a fence. There was a grandstand there that was filled with VIPs, family of the mayors and officials of the sister cities. One of the guards came up to me and ushered me past the gate and brought me up into the grandstand and sat me right behind the mayor of Cheonan. Then they started passing around free samples of products made in or near Cheonan. Afterwards, they made everyone applaud the visitors and take pictures of us shaking hands with the mayor. I was so lost, but I just went with it because it was such a great time. My kids and I were in a touristy area of Mexico, and there was this fancy resort that had access to the beach. We weren't part of the resort, but they had really nice pools. We realized that the only things designating resort patrons were that they were all American and had specific towels. Well, we were already American, and then we got some discarded towels. We spent 2 full days hanging out at the resort. At one point, my daughter made friends with someone with a gold towel, so she got to use that. The gold towel got her all the free soda she could drink. Way back when I was 17, I was working at a conference at MIT, and I came across a packed lecture hall. They were showing the World Cup, and the hall was full of people rooting for Brazil. So I sat down and started cheering for Brazil, got instant acceptance. They started giving me beers, and I skipped work and got blasted, cheering for a team I had no connection to in a sport I didn't care about all day. It was so much fun. I like that a bunch of these stories are people getting into areas or situations to get ahead in life, but this guy just started cheering a sport he wasn't even interested in for free booze. I probably would have done it too in university, who am I kidding? While in high school, I went to Columbia University for some seminar on publishing. I was working on my school's art and literary magazine, and our supervisor thought that this would be a big help for us. After the seminar, I was wandering around, taking in the sights of this big, prestigious institution, when I came across a different seminar, this one for Columbia law students. I would have kept walking, except this seminar included a free lunch, pizza, and I was hungry. So I walked into the seminar, took a seat, and pretended to be a law student at Columbia University. I listened to the speakers for a bit, chatted very briefly with some of the other attendees, got my pizza, and got the heck out of Dodge. I managed to get some required immunizations after the health center closed by accident. I did the checkup thing, the doc told me I'd need to go downstairs and ask for vaccine 1 and vaccine 2, and that I'd be good to travel after that. I didn't know better, so I did exactly that. I walked down to the lobby, saw the sign for the lab I was directed to, and walked straight in to tell the tech back there exactly what I needed. The tech gave me the vaccines, and it wasn't until afterwards that I found out that A, they were closed, and B, you're supposed to make a separate appointment for that. The tech just assumed I was someone important because I didn't hesitate. Guy Gomer. This dude goes into BBC TV studios for a regular job interview. Gomer was waiting in the main reception area of the BBC television centre in West London to be interviewed for a job as a data support cleanser in the corporation's IT department. Unfortunately, he has the same first name as the guy being interviewed on the BBC News that day. Shenanigans ensue, he's interviewed for several minutes before the hosts realize he's not the right person, and he's gained a ton of pop culture notoriety and made a bunch of fun, paid television appearances since then. Years ago, I took a DSLR camera to a concert. When they told me I couldn't bring it in, I lied and said I was with the college newspaper and we were running a front-page story on the venue and I needed pictures. I talked to the event coordinator and she asked the band, and the next thing I knew, I had a press pass. That lie got me in the gap between the stage and security. I had no idea how to use that camera, but I faked it. Then I handed off the badge and the camera to my friends, and one by one, they faked it. That was a great time. For real? My job. On a rational level, I know that I'm good at it, I'm successful, popular with coworkers and my superiors, and people tell me they love my work on a regular basis. But I still have a serious case of imposter syndrome every other day. What am I doing here? I shouldn't be allowed to work here. I have no idea what I'm doing. Stop paying me for this and hire actual professionals. I went to a Flatbush Zombies concert and we got VIP passes, which effectively meant nothing. There was a second floor where the bands were hanging out and one lone security guard at the bottom of the stairs. We just briskly walked past him and held up our wristbands and he didn't say anything. We used the same method to get on stage with all the bands and to sneak out the back door and smoke with them each. Walking to my bus on the way home from winter break, I realized I'd brought tickets for the wrong day, don't ask how, and after a brief call the company told me I couldn't do anything about it and it was the last day I was allowed to be on campus. Realizing I was stuck, I decided to just get on the bus anyway. The driver barely looked at my ticket before nodding me on and I immediately got on and sat next to a friend and went to sleep to avoid suspicion. When I woke up, my friend told me that they'd overbooked and some people had to wait on a second bus. After I got home, I found out they'd left mine and a few other bags behind, so I had to call up again and negotiate having my bags sent for me and a few students who weren't fluent enough in English to negotiate for themselves. Luckily, after multiple speech checks and no one asking for my info, I made it home with all my stuff. And that's the story of how I stowed away on a bus. In short, no one ever questions a sleeping person on a bus. Being an artist manager, it felt like I had to act like I belonged every single day when I was just starting out. Meetings, phone calls, emails, everything. It felt like I needed some sort of confidence and D-bag attitude I didn't think I had. It felt weird trying to be someone else at work every day. When I was in Croatia, I walked into an aquarium where a German school group of about 16 to 18-year-olds were waiting for their teacher to pay them in. I was only 19 at the time, so I just stood amongst them like an inconspicuous penguin, and once we were shuttled in by our tour guide, I flaked off to look at some turtles. Despite being 6'2", I'm consistently good at blending into crowds to the point of being invisible pretty much without trying. I've accidentally walked into the wrong party before and stayed there for a few hours, when in reality I was invited to the one next door. Huh, real-life invisible man here. I wonder how you didn't realize that you didn't know anyone or that the person who invited you wasn't there either. Wild. When I was in college, parking was hell to find during football games, and often you had to park over a mile away. They also wouldn't let you near the stadium unless you were faculty or a cop. However, at the time we had construction going on, and lots of people were driving large white trucks just like the truck I had. Seeing this, I took it upon myself to try my limits and try to get on campus without being stopped. 9 times out of 10 it worked and I could park right outside the stadium. You can go anywhere you want if you have a clipboard, safety vest, and hard hat. And if nothing else works, a ladder. I'm a massive, lifelong Star Wars fan, so when The Last Jedi premiered, I leapt at the chance to go. The problem was, it was on a weekday, and while I took a Ferris Bueller day, none of my friends did. Additionally, I had a migraine in the morning of, so I ended up arriving quite late at the venue at 10 a.m. I was still quite zonked out from the migraine and subsequent medication, and was hustling towards the queue, occasionally asking workers if I was going in the right direction. They all confirmed that I was, and it was just around the corner. Eventually, I arrived at what I thought was the end of the queue, as there were people waiting around in costume, and I settled in for the long wait. A few hours later, it was time to move into the venue, and I'm stoked. I get up and eagerly follow the people in front of me, who I now realize are in wheelchairs, and are wearing Star Wars wristbands, and are actually first in the queue. I'm not in a wheelchair, I do not have wristbands, but I am in front of the queue. Oh, crap. Thoughts of the IT crowd filled my head, and in an instant my anxiety kicked in. I could feel the panic attack rising in me as I trudged behind them, awaiting the order to go to the back of the queue, which at that point meant I probably wouldn't get in. I debated just booking it to the nearest alleyway to have my shame-induced panic attack in private, when I noticed I was part of the group instead of behind them. I started panicking even more and tried to move, but to no avail. We had just passed through the gates and I was officially in the premiere. I stood inside the gates for a moment, debating whether or not I should leave out of pure guilt, when the group I pretended to be part of sped past me cheering. No comments on how I was clearly not disabled, no one stopped me to check for a wristband. I don't know if that group hated me and was ignoring me. didn't care about one person cutting the queue or if they were actually helping. All I know is that it was one of the greatest nights of my life, seeing some of my childhood heroes and experiencing the magic of Star Wars in a whole new way. All thanks to a group of disabled people that didn't rat me out. In short, real life, I'm disabled moment. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Back in 2006, I went to Lollapalooza and there was an after-party that my favorite band was playing at. My friend and I didn't have tickets, so we just went up to the back door of the venue. I whispered to my friend, "Act as if, like from the movie Boiler Room," and he says, "Okay," and just follows my lead. So we follow a band member in saying, "Hold the door please," and they did, thinking that we worked there and we're just out for a smoke. We ended up walking up the stairs and watching the band on stage. No idea how we didn't get caught and kicked out, but that might have been one of the coolest things, act as if, ever got someone. Ended up on the same flight home as the band after that too, coincidentally. I didn't really participate in any after-school clubs besides playing a sport. One day they were taking club pictures for the yearbook, so me and my buddy just decided to jump in every club pic that they were taking. Ended up being in choir, band, advanced French, ultimate frisbee, and future teachers of America, to name a few. Would have been in the robotics club, but we did get ratted out by that point. Princeton reunion. Lived in Princeton, New Jersey for a while. Everyone kept talking about the reunion. Apparently every year they throw a massive drinking party on campus. You need a wristband to get in, but there's plenty of old alums in the area that get them and don't want them. My brother's friend scored a couple, and with some careful passing back and forth, we all managed to get in. This party was wild. Like flash your wristband, here's a free beer. They were tossing empty kegs into a mountain-sized pile like you might do with a can in a backyard barbecue. People were drunk and very friendly, until you told them you were from Kansas and didn't go to Princeton. Then you were a pleb and very quickly dismissed. So screw it, we just started making stuff up. "Yeah boy, what are you in? Me? Eastern Linguistics. Astronomics. Oh, okay, let's get another beer." I had so many made-up degrees that by the end of the night I was having trouble keeping them straight because I'd keep rerunning into people from before. I also peed in a lot of weird, shady corners all over campus that night. Turns out people at Princeton aren't necessarily the smartest people in the world, but they sure are nice if they think you're part of their fancy club. They throw one hell of a party though. Last weekend we got the train to London and jumped in the first open table in first class and enjoyed the free tea and Wi-Fi. It helps that the ticket guy didn't come around, but none of the staff cared enough to say anything. I landed a cushy GS11 position, and I still don't feel like I really know all of this stuff well enough to be here. I just act confident and pretend to know what's going on. I suspect everyone else is doing the same thing. This is government work after all. I was at the South by Southwest Gaming Expo in Austin, Texas. There was an area full of really high-tech gaming computers, and I saw other people casually playing. When a computer finally opened up, I sat down and soon a game of PUBG begins. It turns out it was a tournament and I'd taken someone else's seat. There were people crowding around to watch over our shoulders, and an announcer started talking. I'd never even played the game before, and I didn't do very well. These guys trained all the time, and I'd never even so much as launched the game. This is the natural result, but the narrator does know of a similar but different story of another spontaneous tournament gamer. I think he was an Aussie guy who ended up winning in a low-level Command & Conquer 3 tournament, and ended up going to a higher level for a while. But that individual actually was a strategy pro gamer, just one who'd never played that particular game. A friend got me a job when I was 17 doing graphic design. This particular position required more than 3 years of experience and an understanding of pretty much every Adobe program. He lied when vouching for me and basically said, "If anyone asks, you're 20 and you know exactly what you're doing. If you have any questions about what to do, ask me." Prior to that, I'd done maybe 3 or 4 graphic design projects as freelance gigs, but I was still very new to it. That job worked out a lot better than it should have, no one asked too many questions, and it helped me realize that even though I was doing graphic design as a hobby, doing it for work hurts my soul. When I was studying abroad in Costa Rica, my friend who was a rugby player back in the States wanted to go to this rugby practice he randomly found out about while talking to a guy who was on this team. Next thing I know, my skinny white butt was being hauled along so he didn't have to go alone. I was in a legit club rugby practice that's all in Spanish, and I barely spoke any at this point, trying to do my best to fit in with all of these hulking, terrifying-looking rugby players. Luckily, I've participated in my fair share of sports practices growing up, so I was able to figure out what the drills were just by watching them, and was able to run through practice kinda like I knew what I was doing. Eventually, I was paired up with this one huge beast to do tackling drills. I think he might have figured out my ruse, so he took it easy on me and taught me some basics. He was really cool. Went on to find out afterwards that this team was playing in something like the Latin American Club Rugby Championships, and that player was the best rugby player in Latin America. Go figure! I started at my current employer about 15 years ago. The manager of my department was this awful guy with no management experience. I filled the gaps to make do. One day he just announced he was going to focus on other tasks. Nobody thought to actually designate a new manager, so one day I just started doing all management's tasks. Another day, sometime later, I just started putting manager on my business cards and email tags. Nobody questioned it. A couple of years later, after I'd started seeing the need for better global coordination, I just started using global manager as my title. Again, no one asked anything. A couple of years ago, I upgraded to global directory of, and I was given several raises and nobody ever said, "No, you're not." And that's how I became a director in a global enterprise software company. Was taking some pictures in a city when I stumbled upon an outdoor fashion show which was free to visit, but had an area in front of the runway for photographers. So with my not-so-professional-looking gear, I went into that area, not knowing it was meant for real professionals who had signed up for it beforehand. I still don't know how I got in there without anyone noticing. Maybe it's because I was there very early and the organization wasn't up to speed yet. Other amateur photographers that tried to get in were turned away. I had crap gear, the wrong lens and everything, but no one questioned my presence. I had a blast trying out runway photography in that pretty crowded area. It must have looked like I belonged there because I wasn't kicked out. I moved to Columbus, Ohio in 2006 to start a new IT contracts job for a fairly large company. I'd been there exactly 2 weeks when a woman walked up to my cubicle and popped her head in. "Hey, the lunch is starting, we should head in," she said, giving me the thumbs up and obviously expecting me to follow her. I had no clue who this woman was, what this lunch was, but I was new in town and I knew nobody. I was happy to head to a lunch with other people. We walked to a large conference room that was filled with chairs facing a podium, tables full of yummies and a ton of people, so I just got in line and grabbed some food. I knew nobody in there, but it quickly became clear that a lot of people there were strangers to each other and were from different departments. Handshakes and introductions were going around, and I just went with the flow. I introduced myself, said I was a contractor. I learned this was a good catch-all for not specifying what department you worked in, and I filled my plate with some great food. I sat down in one of the chairs, and for the next hour, I listened to people talk about the new product and how it all worked so hard to implement it. How we all did such a great job and how the upper management was extremely proud of us. In the end, they had us get together for a large group photograph. I was right in front, dead center. Afterwards, there was a sign-in sheet that asked for our name and our supervisor. I filled it out, grabbed some food to go, and headed out. Over the next few months, I received updates in my email about the project, received an award that was delivered to my cube, received a couple of certificates for my accomplishments that I'd never accomplished, and was invited to a dinner a year later for the anniversary of the launch. I didn't want to push my luck on that one. It turns out that when I was brought on board to do my job, the department I was connected to didn't have any room, and I had to sit in a cube belonging to another department. It was assumed that I belonged to that department by others, and nobody really questioned it. My favorite thing about the whole group photo was that it was blown up and hung in the main lobby with other group photos, so I'll forever be a part of the group that I was never part of, and damned proud of it. When I visited India in 2013, we went to the Taj Mahal. Now, at the time, they had 2 rates to get in, a cheap rate for Indians and a pricier rate for foreigners. I think it equated to something like 20 pence for Indians and £7 for foreigners. They could normally spot who was a foreigner by clothing, way of speaking, and they also had checks to make them pay for the higher rate. I was with my mum, dad, and brother. They had lines separated by gender, so I went with my mum, and dad and brother went together. My dad wanted us to get in at the lower rate if we could because he wanted to save some money or something. Now, my mum is originally from India herself, so she knows how to fit in, and she got me and herself to pay the lower rate. My dad wasn't so successful. Him and my bro aren't originally from the country, even though his parents are, so he and my bro paid the higher rate. We got to the front of the Taj Mahal and I realized there were 2 queues to get in. The one for those who'd paid the lower rate was maybe 3 hours long, and it was 4 p.m. or so at this point. Then there was the shorter queue for those who'd paid the higher rate, which was maybe about 15 minutes wait, tops. We had 2 lower rate tickets and 2 higher rate tickets between the 4 of us, and they were quite distinctive in color. My dad decided he wanted us to all try to get in together on his and my brother's tickets. There was a security guy yelling at a guy in front of us who was trying to jump into the shorter queue on lower rate tickets, so my dad waved the 2 higher rate tickets he had in front of the security guy, who at that point said something along the lines of, "Look at these high rate tickets, this is what you need to get in the shorter queue." And he started waving us through, so we took that as a cue to get into the shorter queue. Had a blast of a time.
Redditors who have walked in on their significant other cheating, what were the next 30 minutes like? I walked in and she was acting very nervous. She also wouldn't let me walk to the room. It clicked and I got literal tunnel vision. Such a strange sensation. I don't remember too much, but the outer edges of my vision were black and I can only hear my own breathing. I guess I pushed her aside like she was a broom. Thankfully didn't hurt her. Then I went into the room and realized he was in the bathroom. What I remember is that I opened the door like a regular person. The broken door and her account say that I Hulk smashed the door open with my fist. I grabbed him and calmly escorted him out of the house without saying a word. He was bawling like a 12-year-old girl. I closed the front door, turned around, and told her she had an hour to get all of her stuff and leave. I watched SportsCenter until she was gone. I didn't walk in, but I was helping her study and grabbed her phone from between us to Google something. I was immediately greeted with a long string of explicit text with her "just friend." I set her phone down and left without a word. I sat in the fetal position beside my car in the parking deck for a good hour before I could even process it. We broke up later that day. She married him less than a year later, and they're divorced now. No happy endings for anyone in that story. I was pretty much trembling and wasn't capable of talking, just holding my tears. My hands were a bit shaky too. I wanted nothing but silence. One of the worst feelings ever. Didn't walk in. Caught him leaving as I went over the next morning to drop something off. She was in her skimpy nightwear kissing him goodbye. First thing that actually flashed across my mind was, I gotta get out of here or things are gonna go down. I was suddenly aware how I have anger issues, and that got a concealed carry license, and that I was carrying a loaded gun at that very moment. Looked at his smug face, looked at her panicked face, looked at his smug face again, turned and left, climbed on my bike and sped off. I never rode as fast, as recklessly, or as furiously as that time. I actually think I was trying to off myself. I did crash the bike. I was in such a murderous rage that I kept thinking faster for some reason. I entered a curve way too fast and slipped while leaning trying to make it. I got up, realized I was messed up, then kept walking into the middle of nowhere. I sat in a clearing and remained there until a policeman found me. I told him what had happened and handed him my gun, telling it was best he had used it because I felt the thing was demanding to be used. It was just my anger at the time. Police officer was sympathetic, drove me to the hospital and called a tow for the bike. The ride to the ER, I got to chatting with he and his partner. 10 minutes go by and we're all laughing our butts off lost in random conversation. Me and those guys are good friends to this day, and in many shenanigans we have been involved since. Regarding her, I never bothered to check. TLDR, got cheated on, gained best friends after trying to endanger self. I'm glad this one at least had a happy ending. Calmly went to the hardware store and bought all new locks for the doors. When I got home, she was already there. Kicked her out, changed locks. This is the manliest response I've ever heard. I was pretty much just shaking and stunned, so I walked my bike home and just went, huh, well that sucks. She kept trying to call the house phone, but I wasn't answering. It was surreal. I reacted like, okay, I'll wait in the living room while you finish. 3 days later, I utterly lost my crap. Still haven't found it. I didn't walk in on it happening, but I saw it coming and did everything I could to stop it, including telling my girlfriend that if the woman I suspected her having a thing with came to my apartment when I wasn't there, it was over between us. She constantly told me nothing was happening between them, so I gave her the benefit of the doubt. When I was out of state for a funeral a week later, I went through the Google Home app and noticed recordings of the Google Home speaker being used after midnight. I listened to them and heard the recordings of my now ex-girlfriend and the other woman using my Google Home. I came back 4 days later, had this on my chest for 4 days, and asked my girlfriend as we laid in bed next to each other if anyone came to the apartment while I was gone. She looked me in the eyes and said no. I said, again, was girl's name in my apartment while I was home for a funeral. She continued looking me in the eyes, laying inches away from me, and said no. I picked up my phone and played the Google Home recording, and asked her, "Then who the heck is this?" She was a deer in the headlights. She couldn't speak for 5 minutes. I told her she was a liar, a manipulator, and a freaking coward, and told her to get the heck out. She left her Facebook open on my laptop I let her use for school. 4 years and an engagement. During the affair, I paid her taxes and paid to remove her wisdom teeth, all while she screwed the guy I didn't need to worry about in our bed. In our room I paid rent for. It really felt like getting hit by a bus. I couldn't breathe, threw up multiple times, and finally slept when I passed out drunk. Found out he was cheating on me for 4 months while he was miles away. I was just angry as heck and punched a wall in my house. The morning after I found out, I went to work and I asked my boss to transfer me to another state. A few weeks after going to another state, I met the love of my life, and we now have a puppy and are getting a house together. Wife of 6 years got a new job in medical device sales and was out of town for 3 weeks straight for training. The first 2 weeks went okay, but she had never traveled before, so it was difficult on both of us. I have several friends who work in the industry, and they all pretty much paint the same picture. Lots of alcohol, lots of hooking up. It's okay, not my wife. She would never. But the next time we spoke, she could tell something was wrong. She had been talking about this guy quite a bit in our conversations, so I asked about him. "Oh, he's nobody. Just another rep from another state in training with her." Regardless, that afternoon, I got a text from him, explaining that my wife had told him that I was asking about him, and he decided to text me to reassure me that he was married, had 3 kids, nothing was going on. I bought it. And then, the night before she comes home, it happens. 4 a.m., I get a phone call from her, but in my slumber, I sent it to voicemail. She was absolutely wasted and had drunkenly dialed my phone instead of his and left a voicemail. The voicemail consisted of explicit details of their intimate encounters that week, and since they will be traveling together in the future, the continuation of more intimate encounters were promised, including details on how she loved it when he did X to her Y and Z. I got out of bed, walked down the hallway to our daughter's rooms, 2 and 4 at the time, grabbed both of them, and brought them to bed with me. I held them tight while they slept on each side of me, while I cried the remainder of the night. Not for me, but for them, because their world was going to get turned upside down in less than 12 hours from now. I then got out of bed, logged onto her computer, and, after a little investigative sleuthing, I forwarded every iMessage, every picture as well as the voicemail she drunkenly sent me to his wife. So to clarify a few things, this is a throwaway account, so any questions regarding 5-day-old account, etc. are because of that. First of all, thank you for the support, fellow Redditors. This happened a while ago and I moved on. It still hurts. I still haven't come to trust anyone fully yet, but really, I have no interest. I'm only 36, so I'm just having fun working on being a better me. Regarding paying support, even though she makes twice I do, I pay support because it's my duty to my kids, regardless of what she makes. I'm not hurting for cash, not by any means, and neither is she. And yes, the court system is heavily flawed and biased towards mothers. In cases like this, the girls should be living with me. But again, thank you for being awesome, Reddit. Fun story. I'm a bit late to the party, but I'll share anyway. Had a buddy that I had not seen for a while come to town. We were going to meet up and go drinking, but I ended up having to close because someone called in sick. Buddy goes out and parties all night. I tell him to call if he needs a ride. Get the call at about 3 a.m. to come get him at some chick's house. He gives me the address and it's my girlfriend's address. She lives with her sister, so I thought he went home with the sis. I walk in the house and head to my significant other's bedroom, and guess who's there? My buddy. Should have seen the look on her face, and it was priceless. Buddy asks what's going on. I tell him, let's go, and tell her to kindly screw off. She's crying, and Buddy is starting to get the picture. Tell him she was my friend of about 5 months. He feels terrible and is apologizing profusely. I tell Home we're even if he buys me breakfast. So we go get breakfast. I look at it as he did me a favor, nothing to feel bad about. TLDR, caught my buddy diddling my girlfriend, made him buy me breakfast. I can't help but laugh at this one because there are a lot of factors that I don't really know about, but it makes so much sense to have this kind of attitude after finding out about this. If she had did this to you, screw her. No reason to keep her around. She was doing him a favor. She was telling him straight up that she didn't think he was worth it. And honestly, she isn't worth it. Massive W to this man. Went on a brunch date after staying the night at her place. Some Irish dude was flirting with her while we ate and drank. I got up to take a dump and smoke a cig. I'm halfway through my smoke when she walked out the door holding hands with the dude from the bar. I wasn't even mad. Even waved as she left. I calmly sent a text saying we were done, which she didn't respond to until the next day. Apparently, I was overreacting, according to her. I laughed, hung up on her, then left to join my friends on the week-long camping trip we had planned. Again, more responses from the dudes that are nothing short of based. I love this. Kinda late to the party, but here's my story. Was with my girlfriend for 3.5 years. She spent a weekend with her friend. I trusted her because at the time it was my longest relationship and I didn't have a reason not to trust her. I didn't walk in on her, but one day she mentioned how she wanted to go see him again. The next morning I said, "Hey, can I use your phone to call my dad? Mine is messing up." I went through her messages and he said, "I loved the way you blew me," along with a bunch of other stuff. I walked back in the room, woke her up and said, "We're done." I felt crappy at first for going through her phone because it was wrong, then went to my best friend's house and got drunk and played video games. It was actually a pretty fun day after that. My ex before that cheated on me with the roommate we had move in with us. I was downstairs watching TV and heard them in the bedroom. I knocked on the door and she pretty much told me to screw off. I moved out the same day into my friend's place. Got drunk and played video games. Every girlfriend I've ever had has cheated on me. Video games haven't though. Not quite the ask, of course, but similar. My ex always stayed up way later than me because of his shift patterns, so I'd gone to bed around midnight and he was up watching TV. For whatever reason, I couldn't sleep well that night and was in and out for a couple of hours. About 2 a.m., I hear the bedroom door slowly open and I'm about to ask him if he's coming to bed when I realize he's just standing there in the doorway. I'm guessing he couldn't see that I was awake in the darkness. Then, he inches the door shut so it doesn't make a noise. I hear him put on his shoes and the front door slowly, carefully open and close. He came back around 4 a.m. to me sitting on the sofa and just about crapped his pants that I was awake. I just knew, and his reaction confirmed it. We broke up that night, but he was never brave enough to admit to that occasion of cheating or the dozens more that came before it. That I had to find out from others. Then, because we just signed a tenancy agreement, I had to live with him for almost a full year. Best year ever. This was so long ago that it is almost funny to think about because it made me a better person. I truly believe that. In college, scumbag boyfriend's ex-girlfriend was in town and we were all at a party together. They were from the same hometown and had a lot of mutual friends. I got too drunk and left. He told me he was staying and would come over in an hour. I had a lot of friends there too who were keeping an eye out. I got home and immediately got a call from a friend that they snuck off together to his apartment. We lived in the same complex, so it was about a 4-minute walk away. I sprinted back to his place, my best friend sprinting after me, walked into his room to see them, best friend runs in and punches the girl in the face. All pretty much a blur after that. Some yelling, crying, punching a wall, then just went home and cried a bunch. About 10 years later, wouldn't trade it for anything. Sobering experience and made me stronger. Unfortunately, this user paints a less exciting picture. It was like time stopped, like in a Wes Anderson movie. Everything was slow motion. He was passed out naked in his bed with some chick who told me to close the door. His housemate was rambling something frantically in front of me, but I was not there. I remember getting into the car and driving to a park, sitting in the driver's seat until I burst into tears. It was incredibly disassociated. It broke my heart, but I wasn't conscious when it happened. I related to a deep cut. There's a few moments of nothing until the blood starts to pour out uncontrollably and the excruciating pain starts. Not the crazy story others have, but went to visit her on my lunch break while she was visiting her family. I was in high school at the time and we had been dating for almost a year, so it might inform the story later. Her mother informs me she's at a friend's house up the street, so I go and check. It's the guy I've suspected for a while, and I ask if she's there. She answers the door in a skimpy tank top and short shorts and immediately starts crying when she sees me. I walk away, not even being bothered to care at this point since it has been building for like 3 months. She follows, crying, telling me it isn't what it looks like, and at one point falls down onto the grass. I walk to my car and tell her she has 1 hour to drop off everything my family has let her use/given her before she will vacate her stuff from my house, and I drive home. She shows up, gives over everything including car keys, house key, and other items. I was basically supporting her, distancing herself from them. She leaves and I take the rest of the day off in a haze. That's about the end. I am kind of a distant person in general, so the emotional part wasn't the biggest issue until it hit later in the day. This is a little confusing due to how many people are involved. I'll try to make it easy. So I wasn't the one that walked in on them. It was the drummer of my band. He was living with the guy my girlfriend cheated on me with. He, drummer, called me and told me, then said, "I'm on my way to your apartment to pack up your stuff." I contacted my mom and told her I need to move back home for a little bit. She was more than happy. She hated my girlfriend, so while my GF was still sleeping in bed with her screw buddy, I was home packing up everything. Best part was, she didn't have a job, so it was literally everything. I had it all moved out before she even got home. She had no idea why I moved, because, unknown to her and her screw buddy, my drummer was there the whole time. His car was at the shop, so someone else brought him home. They thought he was gone for the night. Long story short, she started dating an even different guy a few weeks later and called me drunk one night asking me to sleep with her. I didn't, but I made sure word got to her new boyfriend. Also, our favorite TV show together was Lie to Me. so I made sure that when I moved out, I hid all the DVDs of the show around the apartment for her to find. That alone made me feel a little better. Hope this wasn't too confusing. Dude, hiding the DVDs, that's a respectable kind of petty. Didn't walk in on, but my then boyfriend called and asked me to drop off his phone at his work. I go to retrieve the phone and it vibrated, so I looked to see who it was. Found all sorts of communication from a woman that is not safe for work. This was back in 2008 and my ex had a flip phone. I snapped it in half and threw it out. Wasn't a walk-in, but I still love telling this story because in hindsight, it's pretty freaking funny how horrendous this situation was. Was on and off with someone for years. She had commitment issues, to me at least. All of a sudden, we're talking more often for a few weeks. She seems more serious and wants to take a trip with me. We take a ferry ride out to this secluded island off the west coast of Florida to camp for a few days. Has a beach and bike trail. Second day we're there, I get a really long text from some random number, and it turns out she's been screwing her ex, guy she was dating in between our on and off, while talking to me. What's worse, she got him to watch her dog while her and I were on this trip. He was suspicious about how she had been acting, so we went through her texts on her MacBook and found out she was with me. Believe it or not, it gets even worse. The ferry that took us to this island wouldn't be back for another full 24 hours, so we had to stay another night there. I got bitten up by bugs that night, and then we awkwardly packed up all our crap the next afternoon and drove 2 hours back home together the next day, hardly speaking in that period. She dropped me off and drove to deal with her ex, and I never spoke to her again. Silver lining, I'm now happily married to the love of my life, and it's definitely not this woman. In my mid-20s, I was living with someone I'd been in love with for years. He said he loved me, but didn't want to commit and was interested in a polyamorous lifestyle. I did what I could to give him time to figure out what he wanted. We did everything together for 2 years. Traveled to Europe, went on vacations every couple months. We'd meet women online together and bring them home for crazy intimacy parties. My sex drive was off the charts back then, and I didn't really care if it was a guy or a girl helping get me off. We did a lot of crazy experimentation together. To this day, he knows more about me than any other person, and vice versa. Eventually, my self-esteem and sanity began to wear thin. Our relationship broke down. He'd begun to bring around one of our former playthings more and more. He'd always told me that I didn't need to worry about her because he wasn't really interested in her. It was just intimacy, and loved me most. Anyway, it came to the point where I needed to leave. I found an apartment with some friends, but wouldn't be able to move in for about 45 days. I told him I knew he was going to play with other girls, but begged him to not bring them home overnight until I could get out. It just hurt too much. One night I came home and heard giggling in his room. I was staying in a room next to his. I knew it was her. I texted him, asking why he couldn't just wait a little longer because he knew he was destroying me. He texted back, insisting that no one was there and I was crazy. Later, I heard moaning and gasping. Long story short, I saw her in the hallway the next morning. She smirked at me. I moved out 2 weeks early when my place opened up unexpectedly. He married the girl, but still toyed with my emotions up until the actual wedding. Whenever they had problems, he'd always come back, talking about second chances and how we were made for one another. I'm a happily married woman now, living in a wonderful city. I have a dog and nice apartment. I'm still not sure I'll ever recover from the rage and pain that man put me through. Just a quick PSA side rant here. Polyamorous relationships are definitely not for everyone. It involves a lot of communication between partners. For scumbags like this guy, it was an excuse to cheat. That's not how it goes for everyone. For people who are actually poly or part of a polycule, they're way happier with their partners because they're willing to have these conversations and not go behind each other's backs. It's all about setting and respecting boundaries. On my birthday, I got sick so I couldn't go out and celebrate, but my now ex-wife had arranged a big celebration with lots of friends, so of course she went out because it's crappy to cancel at the last minute on so many people. Anyway, I just went to bed and slept. 2 a.m. rolls around and she drunkenly climbs into bed, which wakes me up, but she didn't notice, and started texting and trying to take nude pictures, seriously, to guys. I saw because I was awake, took the phone from her, went through everything. She had multiple dating apps, was texting as many as 20 other guys and sending them naked pictures. All of them were taken while I was at home, either in another room or sleeping. The next 30 minutes were her sitting in silence and me packing my stuff to go to a hotel for the weekend. And then the following few weeks were spent with her telling me it was all my fault. We're not together anymore, clearly. I cracked the plaster on the wall with the back of my head. She said she was sorry, so sorry, that she didn't want it to end things between us. I told her to leave. She eventually did. That was the first time we broke up. Strangely, the others weren't as bad because I had already been through it. Still bad, but the final straw made it very easy to walk away. I worked for a few months, saved everything I could, then moved across the country. The last text I got from her was, "Where are you? We need to talk. I'm coming over. Everyone's telling me you moved, but I know they're lying. I never have snappy comebacks and I never get revenge, but tapping the word California into my cheapy Nokia and then sending it from the sunny streets of Venice to the icy winter frozen wasteland of Minnesota is one of the best feelings I've ever had after being hurt. It all started to get better from there. She married an idiot knuckle-dragging caveman misogynist. She saw me on a TV show once and sent me a picture of herself in an effort to smooth things over. Time had not been kind. When you're done, you can meet me at the park. I sat there with the six-pack waiting for him. Go on. I literally caught him with her on top in our bed. Anyways, so I waited as he showed up with already a few cold ones consumed. Discussed about how long it had been going on and that I was moving out, and he could keep the bed. He's actually one of my good friends still after 15 years. I just hate drama, so it's better to walk away. Sorry it's not a more exciting story. Doctors of Reddit, what was your dumbest r/I am very smart patient experience? RN here. I see some crazy stuff, but one thing that stands out was the time I was admitting a guy to the hospital. I can't really remember what for, but he was about 400 pounds, diabetic, heart disease, you name it. Anyhow, I'm at the computer going over some admission questions with him and his 10 family members who are crowded in the room with him. A few minutes in, he starts complaining that he's thirsty. He needs something to drink right now. So I get on my phone and call the nurse assistant and ask her to bring in some ice water. As soon as the words are out of my mouth, the whole family screams, "No! No water! He's allergic to water!" Well, this is going to be a problem. Turns out the guy had been drinking nothing but Sprite and sweet tea for years because of his water allergy. The next question the wife had was, where are we all supposed to sleep? The whole family, 10 people, were planning to stay at the hospital with him. You can't make this stuff up. Was working at a clinic. I was speaking with a non-controlled diabetic patient about her sugar intake, and she says she drinks a 32-ounce soda every day. I ask her if it's regular or diet, and she replies with, "It's half regular. I let the ice melt first so there isn't as much sugar in it." Sorry, but that isn't how it works. I had a patient who was a completely non-compliant diabetic, smoker, morbidly obese, who had his first heart attack at 45. His blood pressure was also super high. And instead of taking his anti-hypertensive medications, he went to the gym. In the gym, he would sit in the sauna for a very long time and sweat a lot and lower his blood pressure by becoming dehydrated. Amazing. I bet he wouldn't listen to a dang thing you said either because it did technically lower his blood pressure. I have one. I got this from my friend, who is a doctor on the children's ward in a rural hospital. These parents bring in their child whose hair is infested with lice. The lice was visible to the naked eye and could be seen crawling on the child's clothing. While the medical staff examined the child in order to determine a course of action, they discovered the child was covered in a white powder and smelled heavily of chemicals. They asked the parents what were the substances and the smells emanating from the child. The parents said, quite matter of fact, it was 7 powder and the flea and tick spray they used on their dogs on the family's farm. Needless to say, social workers were notified about this case. 70-year-old female tripped and fell 2 days ago. She came in with hip pain, but reports after the fall her nose was bleeding. She had landed on her nose. About a year prior, her dentist had messed up an infraorbital nerve block and caused some swelling in that region, but that was all resolved. This old lady is now convinced her nosebleed after falling on her face is related to an infection from the dental issue a year ago. After multiple back and forth on the etiology of the nosebleed, she became the first patient I raised my voice and put down an authoritative, "No, you are wrong, just stop it." This has got to be the medical equivalent to, "The update you installed on the computer a year ago is making it run funny. Get over here and fix it." I work for an optometrist, and it was the month before school started, and a woman brought in her son to have his eyes checked for the first time. Seems like a reasonable thing for any parent, even he was a little older than usual for a first eye exam. Better late than never, I guess. The mom was well-spoken and appeared fairly intelligent. Everything went as normal, the doctor examined the boy, and ended up prescribing glasses. When the doctor was explaining to the mom that her son had to wear his glasses all the time since he's nearsighted and basically can't see clearly past 5 feet in front of him, and will definitely need glasses for school. For some reason, this caused a switch to flip in the mom, and she spazzed out on the doctor, saying that her son doesn't need glasses and that the doctor is only saying that he does because he wants to sell glasses. She says that she only brought her son in because there was some form for school that needed to be filled out and that doctors are all con artists trying to push unnecessary medications and interventions. The doctor tried to calm her down and explain that he's only trying to help them, but that she was free to get a second opinion and gave her a copy of the kid's prescription and sent them on their way. About 4 months later, the lady is back asking for another copy of her son's prescription. Apparently, the first semester midterm results were in, and her son failed them all because he couldn't see the board in his classes and needs glasses. Any variation of this, which I get all the freaking time. Me, So how are things going with your diabetes? I don't have diabetes. Then why are you taking metformin and Victoza and whatever? I used to have diabetes. Then replace diabetes with hypertension/antihypertensives, etc. Or when I ask them what medical diagnosis they have and they say none while taking a ton of meds. Or when they misname a funny part, prostrate, tendant, uterus, to name a few. Do you take any medications? No. Are you supposed to take any medications? Yes. What for, and do you know what they are? No. Do you think this chest pain could be because of the heart attack I had a few years ago? Well, gee, mister, it sure probably could be. Not a doctor, but I'm a nurse who worked in the OR at a trauma center. Was doing surgery on a 19-year-old who tested positive for meth and cocaine, who was grilling the anesthesiologist about every drug we were going to use in surgery because he didn't like putting chemicals in his body. Gotta stick with that organic, fair trade, non-GMO cocaine. Most of my own stories go along similar lines to patient has chest pain driving a coachload of school children, thinks it's indigestion, swigs bottle of Gaviscon, later diagnosed with a huge heart attack. My favorite ever story comes from a colleague. A patient comes into A&E with abdominal pain. As part of the workup, he gets an abdominal x-ray which shows the problem as clear as day. The colleague has then proceeded to remove, from the patient's rectum, an 8-inch replica of Nelson's Column, the statue in the center of Trafalgar Square, London. On showing it to the patient, the response was, "Oh, that's Nelson. He lives up there." He lives up there? You're just walking around with that in your butt 24/7? I've got two stories that stick out in my mind. The first is the mother of a toddler who came into emergency. The kid had cruddy green/bloody stuff coming out of his left nostril and a lot of redness and swelling of only the left side of his nose and the adjacent cheek. Mom was sure he caught a sinus infection and just wanted some antibiotics. Now, I know some kids like shoving whatever will fit into their body orifices, and that this was more than likely given the one-sided nature of his condition, but Mom was insistent that he never puts things in his nose. It took some convincing, but I finally got her to let me take a look. Gave a squirt of midazolam in the good nostril to settle him, then dug with some tweezers through the crud until I pulled out a big ol' button battery. It would have been burning his nose for a couple days. Hopefully he healed up well. Side note, if a kid swallows a button battery, it could do a similar thing to their esophagus. This is an emergency and needs to be dealt with ASAP. I actually sneezed after reading that. Patient had a hard time getting pregnant. Finally conceived but miscarried. Patient has a D&C so she can try again, this time with medical intervention. We monitor her blood to ensure the pregnancy hormone is gone before beginning treatment, but she keeps coming back with high levels of hormone. Docs are worried because she might have some retained placenta or pituitary disorder, and this could be super bad for future fertility. We call her in for a conversation about the hormone levels not going away. After talking together for what might be wrong, they are going to go home and think about further tests. She says, "I need to go. I have an appointment at the weight loss center for an HCG shot." Turns out that she is on the HCG diet. HCG is the pregnancy hormone, and this was after an hour of the doc saying, "We don't know why you have these constant high levels of HCG in your blood and we are worried." Patient inquiring about birth control was adamant she wanted an IED. Take cover! It's a boy! Had a young woman with recurring UTIs that began after a recent partner and with no STDs. Went through the standard questions trying to figure out what could be causing them and eventually found out she had been lubricating with jelly, not KY jelly. The mix-up had literally been a joke on House. It took me some effort to keep a straight face, but we eventually resolved the problem and she stopped getting UTIs. Oh, I have two good ones that come to mind. Clinical pharmacist here, by the way, with one story in the ER and one in the pharmacy. ER physician told me this one. 16-year-old boy presented to the ER with an extremely swollen, discolored woohoo. Apparently, he had been using his mom's insulin needles to draw blood out of his arm and inject it into his own woohoo. He thought that adding blood would help increase his size. His woohoo was terribly infected and he was hospitalized for a week or so. One day in the pharmacy, a girl comes to the counter requesting a refill for her birth control. We pulled up her profile and realized we couldn't refill it because she just got a 28-day fill less than 2 weeks ago. When we asked what happened to the other one, she said she was out. Apparently, both her and her boyfriend were each taking a pill each and was adamant that was how they needed to prevent pregnancy. I can't fault her for being proactive, but I will say that she's doing too much. I'm a chorusman, not a doctor, but I once had a patient tell me that there was no credible research that smoking was bad for one's health. Okay. Optician here. We had a patient who refused to let us use the tonometer, a machine for checking ocular internal pressure to diagnose glaucoma. He said that puff machine gives you glaucoma and we weren't going to pull that on him. He told us his father got an exam and had glaucoma after using that machine. His uncle and brother also had no signs of glaucoma, and after getting the puff test, both people had been diagnosed with a disease. Glaucoma doesn't have any outward symptoms before you start going blind. This idiot just told me he has a very strong familial disposition to glaucoma and refused to be tested for it. Also, puff isn't that bad, guys. Try contacts. Your eyes stop fighting back pretty quick. The puff is a lot better than the old machine. It just hit you on the eyeball with a little ball and a lever. I also have plenty of patients that don't understand family history. I interview patients directly, so we don't have any real paperwork, and too many people can't answer simple questions. Do you or any of your direct family members have diabetes? Yes. Yourself or your family? Alternatively, if yes to family members, they start listing their spouse's family or stepchildren, not how genetic disposition works. Or after getting no answers to diabetes, hypertension, glaucoma, thyroid problem, heart problems, etc., I ask if they take any medications. Yeah, atorvastatin, thyroidazine, metformin, and low-dose aspirin. Oh, so you have everything I asked about. Check. Want some more? Way too many people don't understand presbyopia. As you age, your lens hardens and can't focus up close anymore. Of course, when this is explained, I get a lot of people who believe they're way too young for bifocals. No, 60 is not too young for bifocals. Why doesn't the doctor have to wear bifocals? He does. He's wearing progressives. You don't see the line. Or after trying to get used to multifocal lenses for a few days, giving up and demanding we remake them as single vision, and then getting mad at me again when they can't read with them. I never needed bifocals before. Why can't you just make me regular glasses? Regular glasses always work just fine. Yeah, you used to be 20. Also, you came to see us because you can't read with your regular glasses. In the same vein, these same people complaining about their own insurance to me because progressives are expensive. A line bifocal is covered entirely. Progressives cost a lot. I can't have lines in my glasses like an old person. Then you want progressives. This easily triples the bill. Why are you so expensive? I need to be able to see. Yeah, you need a bifocal. You don't need a progressive, you want a progressive. Insurance pays for what you need, not want. I actually had a guy make me talk to his insurance agent about him needing medically necessary progressives. A progressive lens is never medically necessary. Stop being cheap and listen to what I say. I am not a salesman, I'm a medical professional. Stop acting like you know better than me. 80-plus-year-old patient who was declining with multiple diagnoses and about 3 decubitus ulcers. Daughter was adamant that her father be kept on his strict paleo diet because that would supercharge his healing. She had a stack of diet books. He simply wasn't getting enough nutrition to heal the ulcers. He didn't like the diet at all, by the way. At some point, you kind of have to stop being polite and just tell patients and family members bluntly that you don't have time for this crap and what you recommend they can do and what they want and just document everything. It happens a lot, but she sticks out. TLDR, gross eyeball stories from eye doctor. I recently had a 30-year-old insulin-dependent male argue he knows when to take his sugar medicine. He had bilateral retinopathy and a severe vitreous heme in one eye, legally blind. Driving a car last eye check 8 years ago, lost glasses 2 years ago. Will need 4 more surgeries, including an inevitable cataract. I had a patient tell me they clean their contact lens with milk because it gets the acid off them. I had a patient ask me if it was okay to look briefly at the sun for short periods of time to improve their eyes. I was amazed and kindly suggested they don't. Had a patient put eardrops in one eye, white part of eye, conjunctiva, scarred over entire cornea and was left with no light perception. Asked me if he should have come in sooner. It had been 4 months. He needs a cornea transplant, which suck and take over a year to recover from. Patient with a retinal detachment told me to put more medicine in their glasses to see better. Macula was off, so they could barely count fingers 4 feet in front of their face. Had a patient wear contacts designed for 2-week daily wear, left in for 8 months. They literally grew into and became a part of the eye. It was repulsive. Had a patient with a 6-year-old translating. Basically, no clue besides eye hurts. Her hand covering her eye. I asked to see the problem. Her eye looked like a shriveled up grape. The optic nerve was holding onto a shriveled up, decayed eye loosely hanging in the orbit. She wanted glasses. Had a lady put jock itch in her eye to cure her suspected fungus. I asked her why she thought it was a fungal infection and she just had an inkling. They are rare. Cataracts on a 58-year-old male working rooftops for 30 years with no sunglasses. Best corrected vision was count fingers 6 feet one eye, barely seeing better in other. First eye exam. Mad when told he needs surgery and should not drive a car. Had a patient tell me the benefits of using alcohol wipes to clean her privates. Out of the blue. I'm an eye doctor. Had a guy clean his contacts and shower with shampoo because he was convinced it was better. Raging red eye 2 weeks later. Homemade contact solutions are always fun to hear. Vinegar? Salt water? Spit is not cleaner than fresh solution, but please tell me more. Had a guy recently come in because wife made me. Tried with tweezers to remove metal from cornea. Didn't look pretty. I removed the remaining metal rust with a needle and spinning burr tip brush. Antibiotics Q2 hours. Told him to not do that again. Had a patient crush a pill up and put in eyes. It was an eye vitamin but taken by mouth. Her eyes were angry. I had a patient walk in one day with no glasses or contacts. Had full penetrating cornea transplant in both eyes 17 years ago. Last eye exam was 12 years ago. Swore he could see fine. Clearly a transplant graft rejection, one eye with no functional vision, and other was a gnarly looking good eye. I barely got him seeing with glasses on the one eye and can't drive. Uncontrolled diabetes too. Messy. Have had more than one patient argue with me about not seeing right. They either had 2 or more contacts in the eyes or none at all. When they try to remove a contact that is not there, it causes a painful abrasion. Multiple women using non-approved glues to glue on fake eyelashes. Leaks and burns in eyes. Just why? Using fake contacts from the nail salon. Then it never ceases to amaze me when I hear, I just use the same solution until it turns brown or black. Every day. Had a patient using a homeopathic drop to cure itchy eyes. She had pubic lice living on her lashes and they lay eggs and bite. Repulsive. But still convinced the drops cause the lice? Here's a link to a Wikipedia article about crab louse. You pluck the offending lashes out and use a cream to kill the crap you can't see. Thank God that was only once. I have to convince a lot of people to not use hand sanitizer in their eyes. Way too many, actually. I had a patient not taking her herpetic eye drops just because she wanted to pray instead. Yes, herpes on eye. Luckily, I convinced her to do both medicine and pray. I could go on and on. I'm a dental student. One patient in particular is a pathological liar. During one visit, they claimed to have gone to medical school. Next visit was that they did dental army. Last visit was that they had a PhD. The patient will say things like, "Hey doc, do you need me to move my head mesial or distal?" "No, I need you to move your head right." "Hey doc, are these cavities being caused by the anaerobic pathology microbes?" "No, they're caused by you eating snacks all day and not brushing." I'm an OR nurse, and I had an oral surgery patient who had a self-reported history of 250 plus various surgical procedures, a list of 20-some allergies, tons of reported health issues, plus her preteen son supposedly had dozens of health issues as well. She refused to remove her glasses during induction, started screaming and crying about claustrophobia when we put the mask on her face. She also insisted on taking a stuffed animal to the OR. Anyway, getting to the point. She was having oral surgery because she told us, insisted, that the last time she went to the dentist, they told her not to brush her teeth for at least a year. So she hadn't brushed her teeth in like a year and a half. That one was for the books. Pediatric dental is a minefield for I am very smart material. But why does my child have 17 cavities? We don't drink soda or eat processed sugars. All we drink is organic juice and eat those real fruit gummies. Well, fruit has a lot of sugar in it, but the bottle says no sugar added. Right, there's no additional sugar added, but there's already a lot in there naturally. Oh, and we're an all-natural household, so we don't use fluoride toothpaste. And we don't floss because the material the floss is made out of is toxic. Oh, and a lot of times we don't brush their teeth before bed because we're too tired. My favorite excuse for not flossing their child's teeth is, "Do you know how hard it is to floss a kid's teeth?" I mean, I'm a pediatric dental hygienist, so yeah. Where to start? Picture a middle-aged man. His index finger is 5 times the size of the rest of his fingers. It smells, it's leaking pus, there's necrotic tissue, basically one huge infected cancerous finger. He was a firm believer in not taking any sort of medication, including antibiotics or chemo. Died a few weeks later, but he did manage to tell us we were all idiots before he passed away. Patient was a young child who came in with an extremely high blood glucose level. Once she was stable, we did some teaching, and I kept her for a few days for observation. For some reason, every time I checked her, her levels would be extremely high although we were appropriately treating her. Turns out her family would bring her fast food for every meal and hide it in the side table. More teaching and resources were put into place. Had a mom in hysterics because she was convinced that her neighbors, friends, stepson's, teacher's dog has MRSA, so her baby was going to die. It took everything within me to not tell her that most of the hospital staff have MRSA. Just had some amazing people inform me with several scholarly documents that MRSA isn't as prevalent as once thought. It's only about 5% of hospital staff. Thank you, wonderful people. But it took 3 hours for me to calm her down after I called infectious control, her pediatrician, gynecologist, and family doctor. Yes, I had to call all these people. Yes, they laughed at me. Yes, she was beside me the whole time, questioning their judgment. I love my job, but at times it makes me crazy. I'm gonna leave you all with this wild ride of a story. ERRN here, not a physician, but you may find this interesting. Young adult male presents with multiple abscesses on various parts of his body. States he injected his boyfriend's semen into himself trying to get pregnant. He tells one of the APCs he should have gone with his original plan and tried on his dog first. Psych clears him. He's admitted to the floor and gets IV antibiotics. What? I've heard of not sticking your woohoo in crazy, but that dude's boyfriend was sticking a lot more than woohoo in crazy. Wow, that's phenomenal. As a psych doctor, we allow for stupidity, but man, that sounds extra special. So, if psych cleared him, that means they determined he wasn't delusional, which means they somehow figured out with a degree of certainty that he was just that stupid. As someone who has done ER mental health assessment in the past, I would love to have been there to hear the series of questions that led them to, yep, he's actually that stupid. What is the quickest way you've seen someone mess their life up? Just a fair warning, there's going to be a lot of drug use and sadness in this one. So, not so much bad as it was sad. This happened around 2006 to 2008. Can't remember exactly when because I was about 11 at the time. I had a friend in elementary school and middle school that lived within 2 miles from me and a CVS between our houses. Her, 12 years old, her little brother, 9 years old, and her mother, about 40-ish, were at CVS picking up a few things and were walking to their car in the parking lot. Apparently, as they were walking, the mother pushed both my friend and her brother away from her. My friend hit her head on the sidewalk and woke up to her brother screaming and crying. What happened was that as they were walking, the mother noticed a car that was slamming on the gas while trying to back out of a parking spot. The car was heading straight towards them and the mother pushed the kids out of the way. Car pinned the mother to the wall of the CVS and she died within minutes. The little brother saw the whole thing happen and has since been struggling with depression and traumatic PTSD since. And my friend got a concussion from the incident, lost her mother, and has never been the same. Sad thing is that the driver wasn't drunk or high or anything. It was a tiny little 80-year-old lady that wasn't used to driving the car and pressed too hard on the gas pedal. Don't exactly know what happened when the police got involved, but my friend has been messed up ever since. This forum has had a lot of comments about terrible people that have done terrible things. Not all bad things happen because of bad people. Sometimes they just happen. I had the pleasure of meeting the kindest person I've ever met. He came from a really snobby and popular family, but he was friends with literally everyone. He would hang out with the outcasts. He would actually come over if you posted online about how you were lonely. He didn't care at all about high school politics. I met him once and he made a significant impact on my life. He was just genuine about being fair and nice to everyone he met. He had every chance to be a jerk given that he was smart, good-looking, came from a wealthy family, but nope. He gave off this huge sense of peace when you were around him. If I had to describe the second coming of Jesus, it was him. A year after meeting him, he ends up missing for 3 days. Eventually, the story unfolds that he was at a party the night he went missing, but he was the designated driver for everyone, so it was odd that he just suddenly left before anyone else did. 3 days later, my brother finds him on an old logging road in his pickup, head blasted off with a shotgun. He had apparently taken shrooms and wanted to meet God. His family found his Bible, and it was filled with highlighted passages about heaven and the soul finding peace with Jesus. I'm guessing that the church he went to had a lot to do with it. It was the kind where everyone affluent and popular goes to, but given that they were disgusting people, they didn't seem to practice what they preached. The evil go to hell, but not us because we are here on Sunday. At his funeral, the pastor had the gall to say he went to hell because he committed a sin by killing himself. That kind of church. I really miss you, Stevie. Thank you for showing me the single bit of kindness I ever found in that town. Not me, but a friend was in AP Chem and they were working with some sodium something and his classmates snorted it as a cocaine joke. He was rushed to the ER and now his risk for nasal and lung cancer is through the roof. His predicted lifespan is like mid-30s, maybe early 40s now, and it was all for a crappy drug reference. A fourth-year neurology resident got fired for attacking an Uber driver. She went through 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, and was about to finish her fourth and last year of residency, acquired hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt along the way, and blew it all after she physically assaulted somebody. My college roommate hit a patch of wet leaves on his motorcycle and hit the curb. The bike flipped and hit him in the chest. When the cops arrived, he was disoriented and bruised, but otherwise okay. The cops thought he was drunk and took him in. In the drunk tank, he complained that he couldn't breathe. The nurse looked him over and said he was fine. Later, he collapsed in his cell. The cops woke him up, handcuffed him, and drove him to the hospital. When they got there, he was dead. Punctured lung. Suffocated. He was 23 and a senior at a very good college. He worked full-time and paid his own way. He was funny and kind and empathetic. He was supposed to be someone important. You'd think over time I would miss him less, but as I get older, I just think of who he would be as an older person. As a parent, I think of the wonderful kids denied a chance to exist because of the stupidity of multiple officers, and it surprises me the visceral, primal sadness I still feel about his loss. This happened in a 2-week period. A friend of mine lost his kitchen job due to layoffs, looked in the paper for a job he could get quick so he could make his bills, rent, etc. Finds a listing for a company looking for a driver/delivery person ASAP. He has a car, so he figures it would be a good quick fix. Calls and gets the job over the phone and is told he starts the next evening. Gets a quote-unquote company cell phone and does his first pickup. Turns out it's an escort agency and he's picking up and dropping off the talent. Does this for a few nights and starts getting to know the girls. Turns out they're all addicted to crack. Big surprise. They get the idea in his head that he's doing all the groundwork, so he might as well post the ads himself and get his own phone, and they'll work for him. So we're about a week into this adventure and he's gone from line cook to pimp. Fast forward a couple of days into pimping and he comes to the conclusion that all these girls spend their money on is crack, so why not cut out the middleman and start paying them in what they want? He doesn't know where to get crack, but his kitchen buddies can hook him up with coke. Gets a bag of coke and Googles how to make crack. Yes, really. Whips up a batch of kitchen crack and then is concerned that maybe he didn't make it correctly. So logically, he should try it first before giving it to his ladies. 36-hour crack binge later, he's hooked and proceeds to sell off everything, including the car and phone in the next few days. I dropped by his place to hang out around day 10. I had no idea any of this was going on. He meets me at the door, explains what he's been up to for the past few days, and says he doesn't want me there unless I'd like to pay and hook up with one of the crackheads in his living room. Strangely, I declined. Last time I saw him, he was cracked out, yelling at people for change on a downtown street. 14 days and his entire life turned to garbage. I was the catcher for a kid in my town who was a nasty pitcher from an early age. At 16 or 17, he could throw 90-mile-per-hour fastballs, breaking balls, whatever. It was a pain to catch, and I had to keep a wet sponge inside my mitt in case I caught one directly in the palm. He was drafted 12th overall by the Marlins and received a $1.8 million signing bonus that he got before he even went to spring training. Ended up blowing over $1.5 million on drugs and partying, developed a coke habit that turned into an oxy habit that turned into heroin. Lost his ability to play, lost his spot on the team and his shot at many millions of dollars. It wasn't exactly overnight, but the dude wasted $1.5 million plus everything he would have gotten had he continued his upward trajectory, and it all happened in about 8 months. My ex-wife had 4 beautiful kids, 2 girls, twin boys, decent job, and an MBA with way more earning potential than she was at. Had bariatric surgery, got obsessed with the attention she received from losing weight, Instagram, etc. Met some guy on this game she played, cheated, tried to make it work, my fault for not ending it, went on a trip for work, met some other guy, quote, fell in love, meth and heroin, landed a surprisingly great job, got fired 2 months later for not performing and being late/sick all the time, double deposited her paychecks at least twice. Now she's awaiting trial for 4 felonies, presumably still doing drugs, and she has no right to see the kids because I refuse to let them see her around that crap. She makes no effort to see them and blames everyone else for her problems. Don't do drugs, kids, or be a self-obsessed ever victim. This kid I know, his cousin gave him a gun over the holidays as a present. So this idiot ordered pizza with his friends, and instead of paying, they robbed the delivery guy. Again, this is after they gave the address and name for the order. So now, because he just turned 18, he's being tried as an adult and faces like 10 years or more for being stupid. We were about 17, and me and my friends went to a beach house for summer. Well, there was a cliff, not so big one, should be around 5 meters high, and one of my friends decided to run and jump without checking how deep the sea was. Long story short, I had a lot of rocks, and he broke his back. He didn't screw over his life, but he lost both of his legs. Justine Sacco, the lady that tweeted, going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white, and then got on an airplane. This story is too long to fit in the video, so just Google Justine Sacco and you should get an article explaining what happened. When I was in college, I had a job at a local supermarket. One of my colleagues left at the beginning of summer as she was headed to uni in the autumn. Next thing I know, she's in the papers because she was driving a car while someone was car surfing on it and the guy died. Saw her in the shop a couple weeks after it happened and she looked a mess. I believe she went to prison, but not sure how long for. I used to work at a little diner in Constance Bay, Ontario. I imagine I could find an article about this. Didn't happen to me, but to a customer. I would estimate that it was about 10 years ago now. This post was made 6 years ago. The customer, female, and her boyfriend were out drinking at the local watering hole. There was that bar in the Legion in the little town. Anyway, her and her boyfriend had driven to the bar, and when they left, they did the smart thing and left their car at the bar and decided to walk home. Constance Bay is quite small. Basically, it's a main road that loops around the whole town, and all side roads branch off of that. The main road has a really sharp turn at one spot. So, her and her boyfriend are walking on the side of the road. No sidewalk since it's a little town. Everyone literally knows everyone. As they're walking, a guy hits them. The driver was wasted drunk. He had been cut off at the Legion a while before the incident. Her and her boyfriend were hit so hard they were thrown into the ditch. Her boyfriend was killed instantly and she was severely hurt. She laid in the ditch for a few hours, unable to move until someone driving by noticed a hand sticking up. 911 was called. She had a couple surgeries after. If I recall, they had to put a metal rod in her leg. So, after drunk idiot hits them, he keeps driving and takes the sharp curve I mentioned too fast and ends up hitting the garage of a house on the corner. This wakes up the owners of the house, who didn't think too much of it, as apparently this was a common occurrence. Thing is, the owners of the house were the parents of the girl who had just gotten hit. I remember hearing how shook up and guilty they felt when they found out what happened. So, drunk guy was caught and charged, obviously. I guess he was known in the area. His stupid decision not only ruined his life, but the lives of the girl, her boyfriend, and their friends and family. It was pretty sad. She would come into the diner for breakfast, and I remember seeing the massive brace she had on her leg. Screw drunk drivers. There was a kid I went to school with, we'll call him Jerry, who I thought was a perfectly nice guy. Jerry was kind of known as the flamboyant gay kid in my school. He was good at school, had lots of friends, was well known in the community, and had recently just been accepted to an extremely good college. Just a few weeks ago, Jerry went to a party and intentionally got a 17-year-old kid so drunk and high that he passed out. Once the kid fell asleep, this guy forced himself on him and took pictures of the entire process, while making faces and peace signs at the camera. The kid freaked out when he woke up and realized what happened. The police were immediately called. The police took Jerry's DNA and phone for evidence and quickly found over 150 nude pictures of underage boys from our local high school, and all of the pictures of Jerry forcing himself on this poor kid at a party. Jerry is only 18 and now faces charges for forcing himself on an unconscious victim, forcing himself on a minor, possession of CP, and multiple cases of inappropriate assault. Right now, it looks like he will serve a minimum of 5 years in prison, but it is likely to be more. Apparently more victims have recently stepped forward, so he may be even more screwed than he was before. I can only hope so. People like that deserve life in prison. A few months ago, I had a friend of mine ask me if I wanted to try crack with him. I was busy, so I politely declined. He now has 3 different dealers calling up at the job looking for money. He's totaled 2 cars, only one of which was his. Everyone hates him now because he's always begging for money and lying to everyone, and his mother had him locked up for stealing from her house. We've been watching this dude ruin his life for the past few months, and he won't listen to anyone when we tell him it's obvious his addiction is causing it. At a party with a friend. I didn't know our friends well. Someone offers us heroin and I want to leave. She, on the other hand, has a crush on the guy and wants to stay. She assures me she isn't interested in trying it. I try to talk her out of it and to just leave with me, but no. Plus, I'm starting to get crapped on for being lame and I want out. The last thing she said to me before I left was, "You're a drag and a terrible friend." I told her if worrying for her and my safety made me a drag and a bad friend, that I was okay with it. She died that night. So did he. Batch was laced with fentanyl and they both OD'd. Thank you all. I'm not okay, but those were our last words exchanged. I will always feel there was more that I could have done, the same way I feel that pang when I see a homeless person, or there is some horrible tragedy. Just part of the emotions of life. I know I had her best interest at heart and simply didn't have the life experience to know how to handle it past what I did. I did pretty well considering that. This was almost 10 years ago, and I've been through counseling and know it was not my fault. It's just never ever going to be a situation I can feel totally at peace about, and that's okay too. Some things just suck. This one's a lot, so be ready. It took 14 years to get to the point I could write this TLDR, and I appreciate everyone's concern and comments. Please consider donating to your local domestic violence shelter. I was very lucky to have the military keeping me safe and moving me across the country afterward. Very few women have any resources except the clothes they ran out the house with, assuming they got out alive. Extremely late to the party. Take out $35,000 credit card debt for online adult images. Pay the interest by borrowing from a Chicago gang. Not tell his wife he's bisexual before she finds it. Take out a big insurance policy on her while she's in Iraq thinking she'll die and he'll have $1 million to pay the card and the gang and live well. She doesn't die in Iraq, so he tries to strangle her while she's cooking dinner. He breaks her hand, but she chokes him out and escapes. He tries to fight police. He then tries to punch judges. Got 2 days for that. But his mama knows the judges, so the attempted murder as the domestic violence and the battery charges are dropped. Then he hides in the woods to avoid the process server for the divorce. So he then threatens in writing to kill the now ex-wife's XO and chaplain, except now it's wartime, so they throw him in the brig for military charges instead of civilian charges, so mama can't buy him free. And in the brig, he brags to everyone about how he tried to kill a sailor by flooding a ship's compartment years ago. So he gets charges of 1 sabotage, 2 attempted murders, 2 threatening murder, and all sorts of lesser charges. Dishonorable discharge, and just got out 14 years later. He managed all this in just 4 months. Source: I'm the ex-wife. The fastest way I screwed my life up was drugs. I got in a bad car accident in 2014 and had a bunch of surgeries and spent 5 months in the hospital. Afterwards, I was an opiate-addicted mess who eventually developed PTSD and was prescribed enough alprazolam to effectively erase about a year of my life. I've somehow managed to zombie my way through college and I graduate this May. My GPA sucks and I don't know if I'll be able to get in the nursing program at MUSC. I've been sober for a month now and it felt like getting kicked by a whole football team for the first 2 weeks. I laid in a fetal position on the couch and watched 10 seasons of Cheers on Netflix, ate crackers and ginger ale, and am somehow still alive. Thanks for all the support. I really appreciate it. It helps knowing other people have had it worse and everything worked out for them. I put a no opiate directive in with my primary care doctor to stay on the safe side. People in my high school who drove like idiots and got themselves killed. Some of them were drunk, but even when they were sober, they did stupid stuff on the road. One guy got impatient and tried to pass a car and plowed into oncoming traffic and died. I remember on the way to a senior skip day celebration, I struggled to keep up with everyone else because they were all doing 100 in a 60-mile-per-hour zone. One girl got plastered and wrapped her car around a tree. One guy fell out of a car because he was drunk and fooling around. And every freaking time, people shed tears and ask, why did the good die young? As if it isn't going to happen to one of the other dozens of idiots driving like jerkwads a few months later. One guy got impatient and tried to pass a car and plowed into oncoming traffic and died. I saved an idiot from this. We're all stuck behind a slow-moving truck or whatever, and due to oncoming traffic, we can't overtake. This is life. It sucks, but oh well. Then some idiot starts playing chicken and leapfrogging car by car, barely making it back into the right lane before the oncoming traffic that had been braking hard not to hit him zoomed past. I'm the one behind the truck, with massive, long vehicle notices on it, and then I see 2 things. Him edging to try and leapfrog me and an 18-wheeler in the other lane. Honestly, I could have let him die. Instead, I did perhaps the stupidest thing I've ever done in a car. Right before he pulled out to try and fly past me, I yanked the wheel over and blocked him, brake checked him, and sent him swerving and braking back into the other lane. I got back into my lane about a half second before the 18-wheeler screamed past, leaning on his horn. The dude would have had no chance to pass if he'd been in that lane and would have hit the 18-wheeler head on 100%. As a thank you, he floored it past both me and the truck 10 seconds later on a blind corner, flipping me off as he did so. This was 7 to 8 years ago, and I'm pretty sure he's dead by now. My mom's friend's foster daughter was about a month from graduating high school. She was a straight A student and she had a bright and promising future ahead of her. As far as anyone knew, she was a perfect, good girl. But literally the day she turned 18, she disappeared. Her mom thought the worst, like she'd been kidnapped or killed. She didn't hear from her at all for about 2 weeks. The cops were looking for her but turning up nothing. Then one day, she walks in the front door like nothing happened. As it turned out, on her 18th birthday and the subsequent couple weeks, she dropped out of school, got a really ugly tattoo that covers a large portion of the side of her torso, moved in a house with a couple of guys, which it was later found out that they were having gangbangs with her every day, blew a bunch of money on drugs. Then, when her mother yelled at her for making her worry and for doing so much stupid crap, she freaked out on her mom and left again that same day, disappearing for another several weeks. She came back to collect some of her things and decided she was moving across the country to live with her crackhead real mother that she was taken away from as a baby and never had anything to do with for her entire life. Today, roughly 5 years later, she has 2 babies from different dads, never went to college, and works at Walmart. She could have done anything she wanted, but she decided to screw up everything and go partying instead of just staying in school 1 more month. This may not be as bad as some of the other answers, but a friend of mine took out a loan for $250,000, I promise I am not exaggerating this number, to pay for her dream wedding to a guy she had known for 3 months. They got divorced after less than a year and she is still in debt from it. The course of a weekend, he met a girl at a party on Friday, put in his resignation at work, and sent an email to his advisor he was giving up his grad program on Saturday and moved across the continent with a girl he met by Monday morning. Last I heard about him, his friends gathered money to fly his homeless butt home 2 years later, and he's been jobless and crashing on people's couches ever since. So, not a permanent mess up, but I've had 4 friends ruin their life over World of Warcraft. Kind of a happy ending, I guess. 4 very close friends of mine all graduated high school at the same time. They all went to college. I joined the Marine Corps. We were all nerds and were all familiar with MMOs and Blizzard. World of Warcraft had really started getting hot, but there was just no freaking way I could play it. But they all started. This was 2006-ish. Fast forward 8 years. I had finished my enlistment and went to college. Me and 2 of those guys are graduating college together with our bachelors. Another one never went back, and the 4th one had to join the Navy because he failed so many classes that his debt was astronomical and he couldn't get back into school. The culprit? World of Warcraft. These guys were putting in 12 hours a day for years on that game. They all failed, all dropped out, all had to pick up the pieces years later after they got their lives back on track. They're all doing well now. None of us, myself included, will touch MMORPGs. Seriously, if you see your life headed down the drain because of an MMO, make changes. These guys lost 4 years of their lives over essentially nothing. Cruise ship / hotel workers of Reddit. What is something you aren't allowed to tell us? Odds are someone died on your cruise. Think about all the old folks you see get onto the boat. For a lot of them, this is their retirement home, and cheaper than a lot of other retirement homes. They are literally taking cruises until they die, and we eventually find them in their cabins. Get a free fridge in your room. Say it is a medical need for medication. HIPAA laws mean they can't pressure details out of you. May not work for smaller motels / hotels, but should for most larger hotels or cruises. Vegas hotel worker here. It works. If it's not for meds, I'm supposed to charge you, but I don't, because I don't get paid enough. May use this in the future. I am diabetic and am supposed to keep insulin refrigerated. I currently work as a housekeeper for seasonal / summer. People leave anything and everything behind. Forget your curling iron? We probably have one. Need a charger? Yep. Toys for your child? You got it. If you ask while we're in between rooms or cleaning a common area, we'd love to help you out. No one really asks. These occurrences / policies may not be the case at every hotel. The staff on most all cruise lines are not trained nearly well enough to handle an abandoned ship situation. It will be chaos if it were to happen on a large vessel. The safety briefing you go to is just theater, and we want to be there even less than you do. Norovirus is way more common on ships than you would think. Security staff on ships are poorly equipped to handle a major security breach like an active shooter situation. The words bright star over the PA indicates a medical emergency is happening, and it's a page for medical staff to respond. The captain earns bonuses for saving fuel. Leaving port early or arriving late means the ship can go slower and conserve fuel, which means more money for the captain. Hotel worker here also. When you bring your children to our hotel for sporting events, baseball tourneys, etc., we really hate you more than them because you get drunk and ignore them while they tear our hotel apart. Take care of your kids, people! I worked for a fancy restaurant in a tourist town that catered to cruise line passengers looking to get away from the ships. Our desserts were frozen and shipped to us from a company named Gourmet Chefs. So when you read the menu description and we say that all of our desserts are prepared by gourmet chefs, we aren't lying. They were just reheated and prepared by a high school kid making $3 an hour. Hotel worker here. Ask for everything you need. It will be provided. Also, complain about every problem you see. You won't believe the amount of free stuff complainers get. It's awful. And never forget to tip your bellboy. I don't exactly agree with complaining about every problem you see. That sounds like a great way to exploit some stuff. At the Fairfield Inns and Suites, they're only supposed to comp you one room. I found a used condom, crap in the bathtub, and a handgun in my room. They comped me 2 weeks worth of rooms. I did not keep the gun. I worked at the front desk of a decent hotel for a year. We had all sorts of stuff to give to guests if they needed it. Toothbrushes, toothpaste, razors, sewing kits, whatever. But we also had huge boxes of tampons in the back. Like, probably more tampons than a single person could consume in a lifetime. And yet they were by far the rarest thing guests asked for. Maybe because I'm male, but still, if I was a girl, I'd be all over that. Oh, buddy. Oh, you sweet summer child. You have no idea how many boxes of tampons girls go through. This was 7 years ago, so policies might have changed since then. Ex-hotel employee here. If you ever need to cancel a hotel reservation, but it's already past the cancellation deadline, just call and move your reservation up a few days. Wait 5 minutes. Call back, now well within the cancellation window, and cancel your stay for free. Hotel worker here. I wouldn't do it. I would get in hot water. The next shift, however, would have no way of knowing when your reservation was changed and would absolutely cancel it for you. I worked as an improv actor on a cruise once for 6 months. What we don't tell you is, half the show is scripted. We just tie in your suggestions. User Pixie Alex had some great insights onto what goes on below the decks on a cruise ship the last time this was asked. I'm a cruise ship worker. First one is, we don't want you to know that we actually have more fun than the guests. Sure, we'll work the big white-hot party that you're all going to, but once we finish our shift, all heck is breaking loose in the crew bar. Just below and to the sides of where you are sleeping, there are crew members doing it, smoking and drinking. Our beers are $1. No drugs or spirits though. We also don't want you to know that all those funny jokes we tell you at bingo? Yeah, same ones are said every single cruise. That really funny answer you gave us about your wife during the Happy Couples game? Heard it. It was said last cruise, and the one before that, and the one before that. We are not allowed to screw the passengers, but we do know all the nooks and crannies the cameras don't reach. There are morgues below deck and a jail cell. We get at least 3 deaths on board a month. Some people go on a cruise to die. And no, I do not know where Jack/Rose is. They're not real people. Hotel worker here. Worked evenings and overnights for a few years now. This all doesn't apply to all hotels, but many. A lot of these will depend on how you treat the staff. Chargers are the #1 most forgotten item. We have tons of them. If you are nice and ask where you can buy one, we will offer one. I don't care who you're banging in your room. And no, I don't know where to find hookers. Well, I do, but I'm staying out of that. We know what's good to eat. We also know where you will get sick from eating. Sometimes it's both, and I'll warn you. The pizza guy tells me if you stiff him on the tip. If you're an awful person, I'm less inclined to go out of my way to help you. I will not disclose whether you're here or not, but if the wife spotted your truck in the lot, you're still screwed. Use the safe for valuables. Most housekeepers are trustworthy, but are humans that are around your valuables. I can give you a discount. We have a little leeway with the price of your room. If we're not booked, I can knock off some cost. If we have one room left, I can also jack up the price, and my bosses will reward me for it. I have also jacked the price up just because I don't like someone. Had some tweakers come in. Every time they asked the price again, I raised it $10. They ended up paying $130 for a $90 room. Food quality varies. Don't expect gourmet meals. We only have a microwave and an oven. The eggs are from a box, but are still real eggs. Muffins are like the ones that come in tubes. Gravy is powdered mix. Everything is Cisco, so it's not bad, but it's not great. Be wary if you see a Smart and Final truck outside. Their quality is garbage. I can't always fix a noise complaint. If it's the people directly above you with kids running around, I can get them to stop. If it's some loud intimacy and I can't pinpoint where it's coming from, you're going to have to wait it out. If you leave change out after leaving for the day, housekeepers assume it's a tip. Don't complain when 70 cents is missing from your room. I will tolerate your crap, but only to a point. You could be rude, but if you get abusive, name-calling, making a scene, etc., that's over the line. Yes, I can kick you out. No, you won't get me fired. Yes, I will call the cops. No, there was no one else in town to stay on a Friday night. Yes, I'm still going to charge you for the first night. Cancellation policy, especially if I can't sell the room again. We have everything you may have forgotten. Toothbrush, razors, sewing needles and thread, deodorant, etc. Just ask. If we're booked, I will tell you so. Asking again will not magically make a room open up. We will call you a cab, but you dang well better be ready. The cab drivers have no patience for tourists. They know you're not long-term business. If you do drugs in the room, keep it quiet and don't do anything that requires smoking in the room. We will call the cops and they will arrest you. The cops are our buddies. I'm in a small town and I'm on a first-name basis with them. We are a huge revenue stream for the city. If I call them, they're usually here before I hang up. They will always side with us. A night in a cell for trespassing is not fun. As an aside, they don't bother me at drunk checkpoints, so that's nice. Don't steal from the room. We will bill you for it. It will cost more than you expect. If you damage something, come clean. If it's something the maintenance dude can fix, we'll probably just bill you for supplies and an hour of his time. If you try and hide it, we'll bill you contractor rate. If something was damaged when you get in, let us know right away in case we missed something from the last guest. Always inspect your room as soon as you check in for this reason. People do die here. About half are old people that die of being old. The other half are people that check in to check out. It's a really messed up thing to do to the housekeepers. The housekeepers here are kind of superstitious and do not like going into rooms that people have died in. It's kind of weird knowing I'm the last person that someone talked to. Tip number 1. If you're going to screw around on your spouse, use an assumed name. The front desk agent will probably be cool and not ask too many questions a $20 bill doesn't answer. I had a guy come in and say he lost his room key and forgot his room number. I asked for his ID and it matched the last name on my ledger. Gave him a key with the number. That was protocol. Turns out, he was there to catch his wife in the act. Tip number 2, always use that second arm lock, though some hotel staff have a tool to disable that as well. Hotels sometimes overbook rooms, typically more so in the summer since that's a busy season. They're relying on some people either canceling or not showing up. Always a good idea to call and confirm your reservation on the day of arrival, especially if you're going to be late. Yay, I can finally answer this. I work at an upscale resort. Nights average $500 a night. I work in the entertainment department, meaning we help with both the daycare center and with large groups in-house that companies host. I will say that our child daycare is pretty safe. The only sketchy thing I would say is that we will always tell you that your kid has a good time, regardless if they have been crying up until just before you got there. Parents leave their numbers with us to call if the kid wants to go home, but whenever a kid complains that they want to go home, we do everything in our power to make sure that they stay. Because money. Also, the in-group activities that we do, biking, hiking, etc., are sometimes made up on the spot, since the entertainment department decided not to properly train us in all of our offered activities. Newer staff, generally the people that only work summers, are told the morning of that they're running a certain activity and given a really vague rundown of how it's supposed to go and told to do their best to make stuff up but make sure it sounds good. Companies pay thousands of dollars for these activities, but I can assure you the thought that goes into these activities is essentially zero. AmITheA here. I worked in numerous luxury 5-star properties worldwide. You will be shocked if you know the food quality in buffets. I've seen yellow food coloring added and labeled as saffron sauce. Pan-fried sea bass? Haha, it's pan-fried whitefish that comes in generic bags labeled white fish. People change the expiration date on stuff so that the food cost doesn't increase. The amount of frozen food sold and labeled as fresh is astounding. A la carte food tends to have much better quality. I'm a front desk manager at a hotel. I want to jump in and say something before this gets real big. When this kind of thread pops up, someone always says that the front desk GSA can upgrade or change rates for a guest if the guest is nice to them or tips them. While this may happen sometimes, it's not common. If one of my employees gave someone a cheapo rate, he has to explain why. It'll come up in our reports. That being said, hotels are a ton of fun. I can't think of any big secrets, but I will say this. If you have any questions or requests, no matter how stupid or weird, let the staff know. We love to help people. That's why we went into the industry. And it makes it a lot better for both the guest and the staff when we can help you while you're still in the hotel and not when you're calling corporate after checkout to complain. I worked at a few independent hotels in a couple tourist towns. A few things. Ask about places to eat. I know there's a Wendy's across the street or the center of town has lots of nice-looking restaurants, but one of those is pointless and sad, and the other one is going to gouge you for mediocre food. This can also apply to things to do. If we recommend a restaurant, we probably either like that place or know our coworkers like it. If we recommend an activity, it's entirely possible we were basically bribed. I would never tell someone to go somewhere I think is awful, but if there's 7 rafting places in town of equal quality, I'm going to send you to the one that will bring me sandwiches for sending you. We take your stuff. Not immediately, but if we can't figure out who you are or the number doesn't work when we call you and you forgot your $300 watch and can't be bothered to try and find it for 3 to 4 months, that's my watch. Again though, we are very honest about lost stuff. Most places I've been have some sort of file for lost and found or at least organize it by month. If you call, we will look and do our best to find your stuff, but people lose so many things that if we kept it all, half the rooms would be full of your bras and flip-flops. It doesn't hurt to ask if there's a better rate. Depending on the property, if you're nice or in a pinch, the front desk has the power to do a lot with your rate. At one property I worked at, if we were almost full and it was past 9 p.m., I could cut $50 off the rate if I felt like it. At most though, I can only really give a 10% discount, but I can do it for almost any reason. That said, don't fight about the rate. No harm in asking, but if you push or get belligerent, I'm not doing crap for you. Also, don't argue with me about the rate being right. Yes, the tax is stupid high. Yes, we're expensive. No, I won't give you the winter rates. Yes, I'm sure that's right. The computer is smarter than both of us. If you go through the internet, Expedia, Hotels.com, and Travelocity are the same thing, and they are jerks. Yeah, you'll get a discounted rate, but the fees can sometimes end up making it more expensive. They also severely undercut a lot of hotels because they have the leverage to do so. We can't do anything to your reservation without notification for whatever online service you used. Call them. They send us a fax/email. The reservation is changed or canceled. Don't call us though. We need that fax/email before we can do anything. Sorry if that makes no sense. You decided to use the service. Worked for a while on Princess. The cruise line pays for the time that any boat is docked. Therefore, it is good for the bottom line if the ship gets out of the port as soon as possible. Ports that are closer to a big city cost more money. That's why we would sometimes dock far away from a major destination and passengers would have to take a train to the big city. The ship only makes good money while it's out at sea, so I've been on voyages that would spend the late afternoon or night at sea instead of in port, in spite of two destinations being 30 minutes from one another. There are situations I've seen on Atlantic crossing voyages that destination locations are listed that the ship will be visiting, but no one has had good enough weather to get into that port in years. It just makes it look like there will be a destination instead of repeated days at sea. The labor force on different cruise lines tend to be preferred by different ethnicities. There are actually two crew bars, one for the officers and one for the rest of the crew. Boils down to being pretty racist with one for English speakers and one for everyone else. As a non-officer, I was literally not allowed to dance with customers on the club dance floor. Drinks and cigarettes are really cheap for the crew. Patter and jokes for most shows are repeated week in, week out. On Princess, there was a 9-to-1 guy-to-girl ratio among the crew. Suffice it to say that really ugly chicks were prizes. We pray you don't finish all that banquet food so we can! Oh, and untouched food eaten out of bus tubs. That's a thing. At IHG hotels, that is, Holiday Inn, Staybridge Suites, Crowne Plaza, etc., if you stay there for a funeral/death and you ask for the bereavement rate, it's close to 50% off. We also weren't allowed to mention it exists, or give the rate unless directly asked for it by a guest checking in. Something else we hid from guests: generally when a guest booked a room from a third-party company, Orbitz, Booking, Expedia, they typically paid more. Our managers had us go out of our way to hide that from guests. Lastly, if a guest came into the hotel that didn't fit their ideal guest, that is, tattoos, tattered clothes, etc., we were instructed to quote them a much higher room price, and if they decided to stay, to actually charge them this inflated price. I work as a longshoreman at a cruise ship terminal. More people die on cruises than you realize, mostly old people. Norovirus is very common, but more so during flu season. Crew members will go missing, often hitching a free ride to New York City. Rare occasion, your luggage will fall in the water being loaded onto the ship. The ship will give you a very crappy refund for your loss of luggage. And if you're going to a berth with more than one ship docked, make sure you know what ship you're going on. Idiots tend to let their luggage get on the wrong ship and have a lovely week without it. Word of advice, if you're getting on a cruise ship in New York City, if your ship leaves at 4 o'clock, get there at 1:30 or 2. You will avoid the crowds and the check-in lines and your luggage will be attended to right away. I worked at Holiday Inn Express for a little bit. Spread a towel out on the counter before putting your stuff on it, because I know some of my coworkers would go from floor to shower to toilet to sink with the same rag. We typically get 10 rags a day to clean. They are color-coded to match the cleaner they're used with, i.e., bathroom is pink, window/glass is blue, dusting solution is yellow, and we use 2 or 3 per room. If you have 15 rooms, that means you use the same cleaning rag for 3 bathrooms. And for the guest, that's the best case scenario. I know girls who would do 12 rooms or more with 2 rags. Bathroom and not bathroom. Nobody gave a crap. The goal was to remove all traces of the last guest and make it smell nice. It was the most disgusting and demeaning job I've ever had. My friend worked on Royal Caribbean on the, if I recall correctly, Explorer of the Seas back in 2006. Said I could book a cruise through him for $15 a night, employee discount. I might have to stay in his cabin with him, but he would see what he could do about getting an unused room for me. Since he departed from Bayonne, New Jersey, and I lived close, I decided to take him up on the offer and do a 4-night trip to Bermuda. The regular room, an interior cabin, panned out so I had my own room to myself, and I got a pass that allowed me access to employee-only areas. I don't know if I was supposed to be escorted with my friend in all of the non-guest areas, but no one said anything to me when I walked around the ship as long as I had my employee guest badge with access to all the employees-only doors that my badge allowed. I certainly gave no reason for anyone to be suspicious, so that probably helped. Lots of fun to just go exploring a little bit. The crew areas were relatively clean, reminded me of hospital hallways. I saw 2 crew bars. There was one that was sort of outside, I think on the rear of the ship, and one upstairs with wood paneling. Nothing to be excited about, but was fun to see them nonetheless. That's where I did my cheap drinking. Never saw the jail, but did see the medical office. They had lots of Dramamine on the wall. Help yourself, which I did. The first night I was on the ship was rough. The crew was a blast to hang out with. Lots of really fun people. My friend gave me the lowdown of everyone on the ship one night, who had hooked up with who. As incestuous as it was, everyone seemed pretty cool and willing to keep swapping the bodily fluids. No room for jealousy when you only have so many people to bang. I hated reading that. There were definitely cliques. The entertainers hung out with the entertainers, the waiters and waitresses, and hung out with themselves. My friend worked in an area where he got to know everyone, luckily. None of the busboys were likely to bang a sexy stage show dancer, is what I picked up from the interactions. Since I was not an employee, but not exactly a guest, I was in a gray area and was unusually entertaining to the women I met. Intimacy would have been like fishing in a barrel. I'm not bragging or anything. Truth is, I really wanted to hang with my friend for the limited time that he was not on duty, not spend time with random women that I won't see again. I don't regret that. Okay, maybe a little bit. One thing I took away was just how absolutely professional the crew at Royal Caribbean were. They loved their jobs, loved making the experience positive for the guests, and took that overall experience very personally. Whatever issues I saw stemmed from humans just being human. Nothing that would turn me away from traveling Royal Caribbean, quite the contrary. If working on a cruise is something that you are mulling, I'd recommend it based on what I saw, at least on Royal Caribbean. It is a truly unique experience that I don't think enough people consider at a time in their lives when they are looking for a rewarding challenge. TLDR, friend worked for Royal Caribbean, I traveled with him at employee cost, got access to employee areas, saw stuff, got a great impression of Royal Caribbean employees, and a positive experience overall. Could have had a lot of intimacy though. Serious. What happened in your this is not a drill moment during work, school, etc.? I live in a small condo complex that backs up against a major highway separated by a tall barrier that's part concrete, part decorative wood. So it's like 5 a.m. and I'm dead asleep and the house shakes. I roll over thinking, man, someone set off fireworks way too late in the night. I'm barely asleep again and it shakes. This time I hear the boom and I'm like, screw those firework-loving kids. Well, I'm awake. Might as well use the bathroom. So I'm in the bathroom and the house shakes again. Boom. Huh. So I look out the back window and there's an inferno just past the backyard, right where the lawn meets the barrier. Oh, and this is right after all those people burned to death in their houses in California. Nope. Wake up the husband, shove the cat in the carrier, grab your wallet, get in the car, and leave. The only exit from the complex is right past the inferno, but we make it okay. The cat's furious. The husband doesn't see what the big deal is. He's still mostly asleep. And I'm like, where can we go to watch the news in our pajamas? So at the neighborhood Starbucks, we're watching on our phones. The local fire department hosing down our condos with fireproof foam. A gas tanker caught fire and pulled over. Then the 3 compartments caught fire individually. The driver made it out. Our place was fine. And now I have a go bag, just in case. I was at a movie theater, one of the big ones with 12 screens. Halfway through the movie, an alarm goes off and no one really reacts. And then a recorded voice advising that an emergency situation has arisen and we are to vacate the area immediately. 12 screens emptying simultaneously into the foyer created havoc. Some minor crush injuries, people falling and tripping others. It was chaos. Kids screaming, parents trying to get in to find their kids. 5 minutes later and we are still inching towards the doors, and a real voice comes on and advises it was a false alarm and to go back and they will restart the movies. Important lesson from this for everyone. If you need to evacuate from a movie theater, take the exit near the screen that goes straight out of the building and not the one that goes back into the foyer. I was in the high school gym donating blood when the alarm for an active shooter lockdown went off. The doors were very quickly locked and people were told to remain calm and duck under tables, but those of us giving blood and hooked up to the machines had to stay in place. It turned out to be that a few young men had stolen a car and had driven it recklessly onto school property. A police helicopter had somehow gotten involved, which sparked the panic. There were no guns involved, thank goodness, but it definitely was not a good first-time donating blood experience. We were all in psychophysiopatho class when the alarm bell rang. It's a class where the whole lot of us are divided in random 25 people group of students. I didn't know any of the people in this group very well, but we were polite to each other. The teacher said no drill was supposed to take place, so we all raced the best we could outside. Except I was in crutches at the time, and the building we were in was old and had a lot of stairs. I was lagging behind, getting more and more scared that I would be left alone. Our teacher was already out, and the bulk of the group was far ahead, and I had no friends in here to make sure I was safe. Before my classmates, all girls, noticed I was struggling and doubled back to help me. It could have been any kind of danger, a fire, some idiot with a weapon, but they didn't hesitate 1 second once they saw me. One of them took my bed bag, another took my crutches, the other 2 put my arms around their shoulders and half pushed me out, half carried me out. I was viewing a traveling exhibit about the Titanic. When you entered the exhibit, you were given a ticket which had the name of an actual person aboard the Titanic. At the end, you would get to see if they survived or not. Right as we finished seeing if our person lived or died, the fire alarm went off in the museum. The exhibit staff ushered everyone into the staff area behind the exhibit and down the emergency stairs. Everything was lit with emergency lighting only and really cramped, and after having just been in the exhibit, you really felt like you were escaping a sinking ship. Probably the most surreal emergency I've ever experienced. For those asking, yes, my person did survive. They tried to match your person as close to you as possible. I was a kid at the time, so my person was a child. Much higher chance of surviving if you were a kid or a woman. One day at work, there was a huge bang, not what you want to hear at a refinery. Site goes into evacuation, managers running around trying to figure out what's happened. Turns out an asphalt truck had exploded next door, rocking our site. Many undies were soiled that day. Update for those asking. The truck has a gas heater inside it to keep the asphalt warm, road tar, and after he finished his job, he left the burner going, gets back to depot and fills truck with kerosene to wash out. Hot tank plus flammable liquid? Yeah, soiled undies. I was taking the SAT. We were maybe 30 minutes into the writing section when the fire alarm goes off. Some guy started a fire in the computer lab of the building because he didn't bring a proper ID and they wouldn't let him take his test. We had to sit outside for 3 hours in silence before they decided, never mind, you guys have to retake this in a month. Kid brought a gun to school. He wanted to show it off and pulled it out at lunch. Yeah, you're not supposed to freaking do that. He got expelled, was relieved of any actual criminal charges on account of no bullets were brought, and he was so young. But everyone dipped from the lunchroom and all the other classes got locked down. I remember being in class when it happened, and not one of us thought it was real because our school did a drill every quarter for that crap, and it was like midway through one of them. This was 8th grade. When I was in school, about 20 years ago I think, we had a bomb threat. They evacuated the entire school out to the baseball fields for hours before they let us go home early. The very next day, we went back to school and they kept us locked in our classrooms for hours while the bomb squad removed bomb material, from what I was told, from the very baseball fields that they had made us wait on the day before. Reminds me of the school I went to where the response to a bomb threat was first to gather everyone in the buses in the front parking lot and then drove us over to one of the 2 other schools in the town. Same school district. We were in high school. There was also an elementary school and middle school. And put everyone in one of 2 gyms there, a much smaller area compared to the alternatives. I eventually stopped worrying by the logic that if there were actually bombs, then whoever set them off would have had several opportunities to kill most of us if they were smart about it, since if they knew the response was to move people to another building, then they could have just rigged one of the other schools to blow and had a 50-50 chance of getting the entire population of 2 schools. Or if they didn't know that, then they still had an excellent opportunity to kill us when everyone was gathered together in the one parking lot rather than spread out over an entire building. That school had a lot of emergency response policies that seemed really stupid, and in later years they overhauled a lot of them. But I feel the response to bomb threats of gathering everyone in 1 or 2 places takes the cake, and I hadn't heard of them fixing that while I was still attending. Honestly, not sure which policy was worse though. Your school's approach of gathering everyone in the fields was also pretty bad, even if it was at least a bit more spread out. It was just at home, but I think it was May 2019. We're about to leave for a funeral and there was a sudden earthquake. I think it was a 6, and it was surreal as it was the strongest earthquake I felt. We took shelter under door frames, and nobody was hurt, gladly. I live in a town right on the Pacific coast in Northern California. We have a tsunami warning siren, and every Sunday at noon, they test it by winding up the horn to full volume for a few seconds. When the big earthquake happened in Japan in 2011, I was literally living below sea level less than a quarter mile from the coast. A tsunami was heading for the west coast of the US, a mini version of the devastating one that hit Japan. There were warnings over TV and radio, but we didn't get them because the utility company preemptively cut power to our neighborhood to reduce damage. So the first I knew anything was up was when my roommate woke me up screaming, "There's a tsunami. We have to go now." We booked it up the hill out of the danger zone, but it didn't quite feel real until I realized the tsunami warning siren was going, and not stopping, and it wasn't Sunday. To this day, that is the eeriest sound I've ever heard. I was in 10th grade, age 15 for non-Americans, when 9/11 happened. It's hard to explain to those who didn't live through it how much the world changed literally in a day, and how while there was internet, there weren't smartphones or social media, so news traveled less instantaneously. For us, we were called out of class to go to an assembly, and we were all joking around because our school had a way of over-dramatizing random admin things that didn't really matter, of the "we are searching for a new vice principal" variety. I probably still had a wisecrack grin on my face as the head of school said they all wanted us to be together to hear this news. Then she said, "The World Trade Center has been attacked," which was where my cousin worked, and I remember the room literally looked different. We were all watching TV screens less than an hour later after the second tower fell, and we got a local breaking news about a plane crash outside Pittsburgh, which is quite the thing when your school is in Pittsburgh and you think it was heading for us, because no one knew until many days later where the 4th plane was heading. Heck, we didn't even know there were only 4. So yeah, that moment with "the World Trade Center has been attacked" and how the room looked different, literally and figuratively, I will never forget that. Was showing a documentary to my class about the second week of the semester when the president of the college came on the loudspeaker to tell us to shelter in place. Somebody had tweeted pictures of his gun saying he wanted to, quote, light up the library, and when the FBI pinged his phone, he was on my campus. My classroom was directly above the library. We all knew this because of our smartphones. This was right before lunch. I was escorted out of the building around dinner time. Turned out the student was bluffing. He was visiting our campus that day with his high school. Screw him. My college dorm had to evacuate because of fire. Some girl was making toast at 4 a.m. and the toaster caught fire. No serious damage was caused and firemen came pretty quickly, but being woken up by fire alarms, seeing everybody panicking, and then having to wait outside for like 2 hours in December was not fun. There was a shelter-in-place tornado warning. It was on that day that we learned our school had a bomb shelter below the pool locker rooms, and it was some Cold War crap. Damp concrete walls, doors with small round windows, and the lights were those old oval shaped with a metal cage like what you'd see on a submarine. Even had safety posters circa 1960 to 1970s. I was teaching at a high school a couple years back when my co-teacher came over from the next room and quietly asked if I had checked my email recently. I had not. When I looked, there was an urgent message from admin telling us that we were currently under a stay-in-place lockdown. Apparently some guy had gotten into a shootout with local PD earlier, ran and was currently somewhere just off campus, still armed and dangerous. But since he wasn't an immediate threat, we were not to tell the students and continue class as normal. If the lockdown lasted into the next period, they come up with an excuse to keep all the kids in place. The kicker for me was that one entire wall of my classroom was floor-to-ceiling windows. To make it worse, the ceiling in my room was about 20 feet. We may as well have been sitting in the field outside my room for all the security we had. I made a quick decision to shoehorn a slideshow into my lesson so I had a believable excuse to close all the blinds. Luckily, the lockdown only lasted until just before the end of the period, so nobody had to punt on an excuse for what was happening. I like to think I covered well, and that none of my students noticed that I was freaking out internally. None of them ever questioned me about it, so hopefully I did. There was an earthquake. It was not that strong, but it was still an earthquake. Everyone was treating it as a drill, which meant talking and talking and talking, until our advisor said that it was not a drill, and everyone started panicking. Good times. Last November, half my school burnt down. Everybody thought it was just another drill until we got outside and began to smell smoke. There was a mad panic as all 1,300 students were registered and registered again until we knew everyone was out. The worst part? It was started by 2 first-year students. This is going to be long, just so you know. On a 225-foot buoy tender in the middle of the Pacific, halfway between Hawaii and Mexico. When you're on a ship at sea, if there's a fire, there's no 911, so you practice all the time for stuff like fire, flooding, collision, etc. But those drills occur during the day when most of the crew is awake. You're alert, the sun is out, and sea conditions are normally good, for safety reasons. But emergencies almost never happen during the day or when the sea state is calm. It was 4 a.m. I was in my rack asleep after getting off watch, so I had only been asleep for 4 hours when the general emergency alarm went off. That's the alarm that sounds for any emergency outside from collision and chemical. So I bolt upright with the what? Thinking someone accidentally hit the alarm up on the bridge. But when the watch officer comes over the ship's announcement system saying to set the main space fire doctrine for a fuel oil leak in the engine room, my stomach drops. I'm out of my rack, into my coveralls and boots, and out to the repair locker faster than he can finish the announcement. Most of the crew is already at the locker, the attack team is getting their firefighting gear on, and the engineering officer is trying to get information from the engineering watchstander. The investigators were already gone to investigate the scene. We all get our protective gear on, and I gather my team. I'm in charge of the pump team, and our job is to set up the portable fire pumps to supplement the installed ones in case the water pressure drops. But the pumps are located outside the skin of the ship on the buoy deck, and it's 4 a.m. in the middle of the ocean. Most people forget just how dark the night is. With artificial lights, we have essentially conquered night and claimed it for ourselves, despite our relatively poor night vision in comparison to other species. But when you are days away from any land, and the lookouts need their night vision preserved for their watch, that means it is awfully dark once the sun goes down. Makes for great stargazing, though. Anyways, I get permission to start setting up, so my team and I all grab flashlights and head out. It's dark as crap, and the pumps are heavy, and all in all, it sucked. It sucks during drills, and it doubly sucks in the middle of the night. We get the first pump set up and are about to start the second when we get told to wait. I certainly didn't complain. I absolutely hate those pumps. We go back into the repair locker to wait. Apparently the leak wasn't that bad and was able to be secured by the investigators. The cleanup crew heads down to clean up so the fuel doesn't create a toxic gas environment, and we go to pack the pump back up. There was a general feeling of amusement at the situation, to be honest. Also, a lot of pride in our response. We hit all the time requirements setting up boundaries and such, and as a crew, we felt like we did good. The command felt the same way too, because the workday was suspended. We only had to go to our watches. The rest of the day could be spent however we wanted. There was a movie being played in the cruise lounge, and some of the guys set up an inflatable pool on the buoy deck to chill in. Me, I went back to sleep. This one's an even longer story. My dad is second engineer on gas tankers. A few years ago, they had a fire in the middle of the freaking Atlantic. Ship chock full of flammable, toxic, cooled down to liquid gas. I can't remember what it was, but they got it to negative 150 degrees Celsius or lower. Maybe ethylene? Skeleton crew, as crew management company was full of money-grabbing jerks, and every single thing that wasn't officially needed was underfunded and limited. I.e., ship had 3 power generators, but ship management allowed them to buy only so many parts. They had to cannibalize the third to get other 2 required by law to run, and everyone was overworked. Middle of the night, a fan sucking out exhaust from the trash burner failed, and temperature started to rise. Sensor failed first, so there was no alarm. At dog hour, metal chamber the burner was in literally melted. Metal started to burn, and first alarms blared. My dad, off duty then, informed Bridge by intercom, told them to organize action, and went down to get people out and start action. He broke procedure by that because he was supposed to wait for Bridge order to even begin any action. That includes inspection on fire size. He got in serious trouble in that later, but I'll go back to that. So he gets into gear as fast as he can, bursts down and in, drags 2 unconscious guys out of control room, starts emergency water pumps, empties both FEs that were there in vicinity on burner chamber door, glowing now, to cool it down a bit, and runs up to get proper equipment and join team. They start firefighting and soon discover almost everything there was on fire, melting and burning down. They used every single FE on board, all fire retardant they have, and gas tankers carry a crap ton of it, and by next day evening they managed to put it completely down. They lost chimney, all of it. It fell down inside, almost killing crew members. Most of main engine turbos and exhaust management, good part of electrical wiring, including electrical power control, so no load regulation on generators. Most of the bridge equipment was out, oil coolers and general crew area AC. They were also down to 1 power generator. On top of that, entire ship was considerably heated up, which meant lots of stress in the hull and gas tanks. They were venting gas as cooling equipment was overloading the power generator. Radar, satellite, high power radio, all off. They slowly creeped to US and got to Houston with Coast Guard and firefighting barge assist. Now, the true storm starts. First, they got an inspection, which revealed they didn't have enough firefighting equipment on board. Inspectors were deaf to the argument that it has all been used. Fine number 1. Second, after unloading the gas, they got a hefty fine for the gas being too hot. No duh. Also, another fine for vented gas, because cargo manifest didn't match with ship's content. Third, another fine for environmental damage, as main engine exhaust was not cooled and filtered. Lack of chimney and fire marks were of no consequence to port authorities. Next, my dad got into trouble. Ship management decided he was to pay the fine of $100,000 for not waiting on Bridge's orders. Later withdrawn, as inspections shown if he hadn't cooled down the door, no one would ever got in and 2 people would die. Also, seawater pumps couldn't be started in any other way. They still threatened him in every possible way and tried very hard to make him assign responsibility for whole fire and damages. Sadly, he was very, very close to doing it before I forced him to meet with my friend, a lawyer. And the last, most infuriating part, ship management refused to pay for firefighting equipment replacements as, quote, it was crew that used them, without permission from central office. After that, they did 1 more cargo run around Mexico's ports before ship was forwarded to a shipyard for repairs. Most of the crew changed company afterwards. Yeah, cost-cutting in the most obnoxious way, haranguing on every single regulation, as long as there is even a slight chance it will slide under the radar, and complete disregard for the fact that crew is human, not a bunch of robots. My dad was a firefighter. He was casually watching Titanic at the theater. You know when this happened then. Out of nowhere during the movie, projectors stopped, all lights shut down, and some guy opens the door of the theater and told everyone to get out that there was a fire. As my dad walked out, his firefighter senses were triggered. He felt the draft of air being sucked out of the theater room going into the main hall. Fire alarm couldn't be heard from inside because the volume of the movie was so loud. Everyone got out. It was a big complex with restaurants and bars next to the cinema. Everything burnt down, millions of dollars of damages. It was a teenager playing with matches while smoking behind dumpsters. My dad had to wait for the double VHS to be released to know how Titanic ended. That's the best part of the story happening in the 20th century. For the record, it was in 1998. We had someone fall off a boat down at the boat launch when I worked at a campground. She hit her head on the dock and started sinking while unconscious. Luckily, her BF dove in and grabbed her before she drowned. However, she was incoherent, so we had to immobilize/warm her up in a truck and then call in a heli to take her to the nearest hospital. It was crazy. We had to mark a landing zone and lay down some flares and everything. School had a lockdown. Was coming back from lunch and saw a bunch of cops. Asked one what's up and was told someone had reported a gun in the building and it's on lockdown. I went home. Found out the next day, kid had a BB gun in his backpack, and I guess ticked off a friend, who then told the office what he had. Side note, the group that kid would run with was known for starting fights with people over nothing, so I guess karma is a jerk. It was woodwork, and in my classes, we have a dust collector connected to an automatic sander, and a nail happened to get sanded and made sparks to fine wood chips, so it exploded in fire in a woodwork building. I was still working as a hostess, and we had just opened up. In the morning, we usually only have 3 servers on the floor for the first 30 or so minutes. 5 to 6 families immediately walk in, which is good for the openers. Everybody gets 2 tables to start. I was seating the last of the families when I heard a horrible wail from the back. I honestly didn't think anything of it at first, until I realized 2 of the 3 servers hadn't come out front to greet their tables. One of the servers, while switching out the tea bags, scalded herself across the face with boiling water. The second server was already calling paramedics and trying to keep her calm while she went into shock. So now I had 1 server for 6 tables. About half of them were intensely understanding, but one family was giving me max attitude. I finally snapped at the wife and said, "Ma'am, the server in charge of your section just suffered 3rd-degree burns across her face. If you're in such a rush that you cannot wait for emergency crews to get here, I would be more than happy to suggest other establishments that can accommodate you." Right at that moment, the EMTs arrived. 6 huge Captain America stunt doubles finagling the gurney through the restaurant. She shut right up. The server ended up being okay and didn't have any permanent scars, but for the rest of the day I was jittery from the adrenaline rush. Parents of Reddit, what's the funniest reason you've been called into school to collect your child? I was called to collect my son when he was in 1st grade because, quote, he was being disrespectful to his classmates. They wouldn't explain. My son told me that Jeffrey pantsed him, and that makes no sense. About an hour later, the light bulb went on. You didn't wear underwear today, did you? Nope. When I was in middle school, some poor guy got pantsed right in front of me. A girl who shared many of his classes. Normally, it'd be no big deal. Someone got pantsed in my school on at least a weekly basis. No, the really awkward part was I was kind of crouched down because I had a bottom locker and he was standing up with the top locker next to mine. Not above, but I guess on a diagonal. His pantser shouted right as he pulled, so of course I looked up at the shout because it startled me. And well, the pantsed individual's boxers had been pulled down along with his pants, so right in front of my eyes was a dingaling. It was the first dingaling I'd ever seen in person, well outside of seeing like baby cousins get changed and stuff, and considering we were 11, I was presumably the first girl, outside of his close family when he was little, to see his dingaling. It was just for a split second because obviously the guy pulled his pants back up with lightning reflexes. I've never seen someone go so red in the face. We both stood there in shock for a couple of seconds as the hallway cleared and began walking in class. We shared the next class. Oh no, that's even more awkward. The whole time he was stammering out apologies and I kept telling him it wasn't his fault. It's not like he'd pulled his own pants down. After class, other students asked me if I'd seen it, and I lied profusely. What are you talking about? He was wearing underwear. How would I see anything? Oh, well, in the back they came down. The whole hallway could see his butt. Oh my god, well, they didn't come down in the front. The rest of the year, this guy who was a practical stranger was pretty nice to me. Not like flirty nice, but I think he figured out that I lied, so I felt he owed me one. I was called in because the elementary school was going on a field trip that my son forgot to give me the permission slip for. He decided to give forgery a whirl. This was in 1st grade, so the handwriting was awful. He also signed my name, Mom. I got a phone call earlier this year from the school nurse, saying she was concerned because my son had passed out while on the lunch line. I went to pick him up and he seemed a little dazed, but okay. My kid couldn't remember anything about what happened beforehand, so I made an appointment with his pediatrician for an hour later. Right as we're getting to leave, he sheepishly said, "Mom, I just remembered that right before I passed out, we were playing a game to see who could turn their face the reddest." So, my kid had me thinking he had a brain tumor, but no, he just held his breath until he passed out, and not a single other kid thought they should mention that to the teacher. Embarrassed to admit, but I've done this before. I was getting ready for school in the morning and decided out of the blue to do this. Promptly passed out and cracked my head on the dresser on the way down. I come to almost immediately and just sat there on the floor confused as to what happened. I already had this huge lump forming on my head and a killer headache, but I didn't want to tell my dad because I didn't want him to be mad. So I went to school and was miserable all day. When I got home, I finally told my sister. She took one look and ran to tell Mom. I had a goose egg-sized lump on my head. All said and done, I had 2 MRIs and a sleep test. Don't know the proper name. Everything turned out fine in the end. I never admitted I'd passed out because I held my breath too long. In my senior year of high school, I was nearly not allowed to graduate, and my family was called because I forged my own name by writing in the Guardian section of a permission slip. I was 18. My kid got in huge trouble in kindergarten. A girl told the teacher he said the S word. He lost recess, they called me, it was a big deal. I went to pick him up and said, "So what's the S word?" And he stared at his shoes and whispered, "Sexy." Yeah, confirmed by the little tattletale. All of this was caused by sexy. Funniest one I've ever heard. My kid, surprisingly well behaved at school. Was a parent having to come get their kid after they were caught selling imaginary friends to the younger students for $1 apiece. I made the mistake of telling my stepdaughter about the professor I had in college that we never knew read our papers, so it turned into a class game to fit ridiculous sentences and bad jokes into the middle of them to see if we'd ever get caught. She apparently decided that was an amazing thing to do, and I got called for a phone conference because she turned in a history paper that was chock full of awful puns that were not appreciated. My mother was called to pick me and my twin sister up because we were turning blue. I think it was in 4th grade. We felt fine though. It was only after she arrived that we all remembered she had put brand new blue flannel sheets on our bed the night before. Apparently, she hadn't washed them first. My little brother liked cheese and mustard sandwiches, so my mom made him cheese and mustard sandwiches for lunch. When the teacher asked why he didn't have any meat on his sandwich, he said either "we can't afford meat" or "my mom doesn't let me," or something like that. Whatever he said was enough to send CPS over to the house. Another time, he came to school saying that his mom loved Coke, that his mom said she's addicted to Coke. CPS was called again. They lived in a different area this time. Coca-Cola. My mom couldn't go a day without a Coke, so she joked that she was addicted to Coke. I do see the irony that she was actually addicted to a drug, just not the one CPS was worried about. I got a call that my son was sick and that I had to come pick him up. He was completely fine that morning. I asked the nurse, "He really can't go back to class?" And she said, "He says he's really sick." Fine. I picked him up and on the walk home I asked what was up. He said he had to fart really badly and didn't want to do it in class. I laughed and said okay. 2 days later, I get another call to pick him up. So I got him and it was for the same reason. I told him that it was funny once, but that from now on, if he needed to fart in class, he should go to the bathroom. Daycare. Had to talk to the director because my son, 3 or 4, told another kid I'm gonna F you up. Turns out he was singing Bruno Mars' Uptown Funk You Up. My child's 1st grade teacher was upset that he had accidentally smooshed a butterfly on the playground at recess. When I got there, my child was also missing his glasses. She hadn't noticed this. My youngest had a slight speech impediment when he was at nursery. He would replace his S's with F's to approximate the sound. I had to have a chat with the head at pickup time because I'd unthinkingly used the phrase "so long, suckers" when pulling away from some traffic lights the day before, and he liked the sound of it so much he used it himself. My professor cited my mom because she said I was writing too slow and turned my test in right as the bell rang. My mom had to leave work early to hear about her child writing slow. The reason I was writing slow was because on my last test, I was docked points for handwriting. So this time, I made sure I had the purtiest, most fanciest handwriting that teacher had ever seen. After that, the teacher stopped docking me points due to handwriting. As somebody with notoriously crappy handwriting, I felt this post. That was in elementary school, early years. The principal called us and looked at us with a stern look of disapproval while telling us our son was using bad language. I then proceeded to explain to her that my wife and I only spoke French at home and we did not have television. The only English our son had ever heard was at school, so I asked her what she was going to do about it. It was one of the shortest conversations I ever had with that principal. About the principal, as I recall, she suddenly remembered she had to do something urgently and the meeting was over before I could say anything else. Literally, pardon my French. I was the kid and I was in 3rd grade. I climbed on a tree, not even that high, and then I wanted to climb down. A teacher who hated me saw me and told me to stay there and not to move. I told her it's no problem for me to come down. She insisted I stayed there and turned around to call the fire brigade to get me down. I had enough and climbed down anyway, and then she called my mom because it was my fault the fire brigade was called for no reason. I was in an early morning college class, and when I got out, I realized I had missed calls, texts, and emails from my daughter's preschool. A voicemail said she had been throwing up and to please hurry and come get her. When I got to the school, the receptionist showed me to a room where my daughter was sat with the trash can on her lap. She told me my daughter kept announcing she was throwing up and then would cough into the trash can. She had no fever and was otherwise cheerful and talkative. I signed her out, got her outside, and into my car where she jumped forward and kissed my cheek and told me she missed me and where would I like to go for lunch. That kid busted herself out of preschool to finagle a lunch date with me. It worked. Aww. I was the child in 6th grade. I was 12. I was in my emo phase and was wearing a lot of black eyeshadow from Claire's. I guess I wasn't so good at my makeup yet because they called my mom into the office to discuss my injuries and who was, in quotes, hurting me. I had super bad allergies as a child to the point where I had awful dark circles under my eyes that legitimately looked like bruises. I had the principal and my teacher asking if everything was okay at home and pointed to my eyes. I let them know about my allergies and they skeptically accepted the answer. 2 weeks later, I stepped in a large hole in the ground by accident and fell flat on my face, giving me an actual black eye. Trying to explain to the principal, my teacher, and the school counselor that I actually fell was no easy task. My son went to a private Catholic school from 1st grade through 8th grade. I had a nun call me one day because my son and a friend were having a peeing for distance contest in the bathroom. And then another day I was called because my son was looking to see if the dictionary had the word dingaling in it. Both incidents were in the 3rd grade. When I was in 7th grade, I was an office runner. Basically, if your reading and writing skills were above a certain level, they let you skip reading class and just work in the office, getting kids whose parents had come for them, delivering messages, that sort of thing. Anyway, the kid next to me just wouldn't shut the heck up. He kept rattling on and on and on, and I had enough of it. I had a monster fart brewing, so I cocked my leg, locked eyes with him, told him to shut his mouth, and farted on him. Or, at least, that was the plan. Instead, I cocked my leg, locked eyes with him, told him to shut his mouth, and completely crapped my pants in the most glorious fashion. This wasn't a little nugget. This was a full pants load of chocolate pudding that ran down my leg and made a little puddle on the floor. Everything in the office goes dead silent, and there's no mistaking what's just happened. The kid just stared at me with absolute horror in his eyes. Without looking away from him, I raised my hand and said, "Miss Office Lady's name, I don't remember. I think I need to call my mom." I went home, took a bath, threw the pants away, and came back the next day. The kid was seated on the opposite side of the room from me, and I never had a problem with him again. He feared and respected me from then on. Anybody want dessert? My dad got sent to the principal's office for telling his 6th grade teacher she was pronouncing the state capital of South Dakota, Pierre, wrong. She kept saying Pierre, 2 syllables like the French name, and he said it was Pierre, 1 syllable, like what you fish off of. He was sent off for not respecting a teacher's authority. My grandma had to drive to school to talk to the teacher and principal and says, "Did you ask why he says it's Pierre? Because if you did, you'd find out that both his father and I are from South Dakota. He visits his grandparents and aunts and uncles in South Dakota every summer. He knows plenty of people from South Dakota who all say Pierre. Do you know anyone from South Dakota? No? Well, take it from a South Dakotan. It's Pierre. We're not fancy French people, and stop wasting my time." Okay, but to be honest, I didn't know it was Pierre either. I kept saying Pierre all my life, so I'm sorry if there's anybody out there who was offended by my ignorance as a young child. So yeah, let's just keep going. We don't have to talk about it. My son, 14, 8th grade, during class change, walked into the boys' bathroom, put his hands over his head, and while thrusting his hips in a humping motion, told all the other boys in the room to "Protect your buttholes, gentlemen, here I come." The funniest part about it all, that exact same description was jotted down on the write-up slip. Even the principal couldn't stop laughing. My daughter hid inside of a toy box for hours in preschool and the teachers couldn't find her. She's gonna be my wild child. When I was in 2nd grade, I had a shirt that we got as a hand-down from a friend of my mom's with Braille on the front. Apparently, no one ever took the time to figure out what it said, but there was a translator/key on the sleeve, so I sat down and translated the word on the front, 1 letter at a time while in class. F-U-C-K-O-F-F. "Oh my," I said. I knew this was a bad word, so I told my teacher and apologized. I wasn't in trouble, but my parents were called and asked to come bring in a new shirt while I waited in the office. My principal thought it was hilarious, apparently. We had a classmate who was partially blind. I'm unsure if she had vision enough to see my shirt, but she did know Braille. I believe that is one of the reasons I had to wait in the office, though. Not a parent, but as a kid, when I got Pokemon Yellow, I was so gosh darn into it that when we went out for lunch one day at school, I got inside this huge bush that was practically hollow inside. It was among a load of other large bushes and trees at the side of the school field, and rarely ever was entered by students because we weren't really allowed. So I sat there for hours playing Pokemon, and when I came out it was 3 p.m. School closed at 3:30. I had been in there since 12:30, and my mother was at the school and was freaking out because she thought they let me leave the school alone. I got called on my work cell several times right out of college to come to a local high school because my 14-year-old son was in trouble. I don't have a son, and if I had a son, it would be very impressive if he was 14 years old then because I would have had to conceive him when I was 9. I told them that. They kept calling. Finally, I showed up at the high school to prove that I, a 23-year-old white guy, was not the father of the 14-year-old Indian boy. The assistant principal was like, "Oh, right." My mom told me that when my brother was in grade school, she got the call to pick him up for a day's suspension. Turned out during lunch, he opened his lunchbox and pulled out a can of Foster's. It was empty and it was meant to be a joke, but the school didn't see it that way. He was 9 and right at the start of a decade-long mission to raise heck. I got a call to pick up my daughter in kindergarten because she had no underwear. She had them on when I put her on the bus, so I have no idea what happened. Totally embarrassing. Oh my. I have 4 kids, all adults now, who were pretty high-spirited back in the day. My oldest son, however, wins the prize from an incident in 6th grade. I got a call one afternoon that he had been sent to the principal's office. Nothing new there, and I needed to come get him at once. Uh-oh. He had mooned the 2nd graders. All of them. And their teachers. Not me, but a classmate of a coworker sent everyone home many years ago. He nicked a decent bit of elemental potassium from the chemistry lab and dropped it down the sewer access pipe outside the school. This was not good for the school's plumbing. City had to dig up the sidewalk to repair things. For those not aware, here's a quick chemistry lesson. Potassium plus water equals violent boom. Nobody should be throwing any sort of potassium or sodium down a sewer pipe because that will cause severe problems. Not me, but my sister. She got a call from her son's very Catholic school that he needed to be picked up. She gets to the school and the principal said that he had to go home for the day because he peed on the tree outside at recess. He really laid into her about how they had to bleach the tree. Seriously, they poured bleach on the tree because a little kid peed on it. And it was terrible, and how she shouldn't be teaching her son these things. My sister looked him straight in the eye and asked, "Do you really think I have the right plumbing to have taught him that? Yell at my husband when he comes in next time." Me, when I was a kid, we moved from Middle America to the West Coast. I had extra R sounds in my words. They called my mom about my speech impediment. After talking to my mom, they understood that it was not a speech impediment, but my birth sound language. It is Washington, not Washington. It's funny now, but wasn't at the time. One day, I was called to pick up my daughter from school. I asked why and was vaguely told she had been caught cheating, was being disrespectful to the teacher, and had destroyed government property. Holy crap, I thought. What had she done? My mind instantly went through scenarios in which she had cheated on a test, got caught, that my sweet little 7-year-old had cursed the teacher while throwing something out the window. I go to the school, found my scared daughter in the principal's office looking totally dejected and asked for an explanation. I discovered the cheating was that she had giggled while playing a game where someone was it, and the other half of the classroom had to guess who it was. The disrespecting teacher was from her crossing her arms when she was being told how she wrecked the game. The best was the explanation for destroying government property. During story time, she was picking at loose carpet threads. I was extremely angry with my daughter the whole drive from work, and after this load of WTF, it instantly transferred to anger with the school. You called me here because she giggled, crossed her arms, and picked at old nasty carpet? I was hot and took my daughter home, letting her know I was a bit upset with her, but let her know that there would be no more punishment. She'd been through enough. We went home and watched cartoons, and I made her favorite grilled cheese and tomato soup for lunch. I received a call from the vice president of my daughter's school one day while I was at work. I could tell the VP was holding back her laughter, but she tried to remain professional. "Hello. Your daughter acted out in class today. The children were switching from coloring to reading at the carpet. She threw her crayons down and pointedly said to the teacher, 'Are you freaking kidding me?' My knee-jerk reaction was, 'Dang it, are you freaking kidding me?' It's clear where she learned this from. My second thought was, dang, I have a kid in junior kindergarten that knows how to use that phrase in a correct form. The following year, the VP is no longer at the school. We attend similar social groups and talk often. She loves to tell me that making that phone call was one of the funniest calls she has had to make as an educator. My dad was called into the school when I was in grade 1. Apparently, I've been caught with my hand in a girl's pants and hers in mine while in class. Okay, but I feel like we're missing context here. By apparently, I can think of 2 options. 1, you were caught but didn't know that you had done anything wrong until your dad came to pick you up. Or 2, you were somehow pegged as doing something you didn't actually do, which, given most American school systems, I could easily believe. But where's the evidence, OP? Nephew was staying with me for 2 months. I showed him Dexter's Laboratory for the first time. Next day, they called me to pick him up because he would only say omelette de fromage to any interaction. I too was the child. I peed on my friend in 5th grade. Another pee one? What's going on here? We were competing in who could pee the furthest back from the urinal when a buddy of mine decided to run underneath it for laps. Hand slipped, peed down his back. Sent to the principal's. My 4-year-old's teacher told me he had repeatedly called her a butthole. She had taken something away from him and said, "That's all." Every time she came near him, he said, "That's all" to her. Knowing him, he probably used the same tone of voice she had used, and she was a nasty piece of work. In case you don't get it, say "that's all" to yourself in increasingly varying tones, and you'll see why he got in trouble. Unicorn Club. So my daughter was in 5th grade. She was proving to be pretty responsible, so she was allowed to have a cell phone because she was home about an hour before I was on weekdays, and an Instagram account that I heavily monitored. We never had any issues, still haven't, and now she's in high school. Well, I get a call from her school's principal one day. He tells me 2 boys were fistfighting in the lunchroom. I asked what that had to do with my daughter. Well, apparently, my child had used an Instagram account to start what was essentially a cult called Unicorn Club. Unicorns were obviously the worshipped deity, with goats being the devil figure to the unicorn gods. These 2 boys got into a fistfight over whether unicorns or goats were better. I had to pick her up to prevent further disputes and disband Unicorn Club. TLDR, my 10-year-old daughter created a small cult around unicorn worship. Guys, leave a comment right now. Unicorns or goats? My child with mild tree nut allergy went to the nurse since she ate a mystery food and her throat felt weird. She has been evaluated and her allergy does not warrant an EpiPen. I rush over because she usually gets hysterical and would need Benadryl, which the school can't administer. I arrive. She's all smiles. She feels better now after some water. The mystery food? Fuego Takis. She was 6 when this happened. The one that made me laugh and shake my head was when my son was in the 2nd grade. He decided that instead of helping one of his fellow classmates with his work, that he'll just do his work for him. When I asked him why, his answer really tickled me. "Mom, so our table will be the first table to get snacks." People who ran into the weird kid from school years later, how did he or she turn out? My friend's dad told him about the weird classmate he had. Nobody really took him seriously. When they were in their last grades, that kid decided that right after school, he'll be growing fun guy instead of studying. Everyone laughed at him. And guess what? Right now, he owns probably the largest organic farm business both in the country and most likely in the whole region. Sounds like a pretty fun guy. We had a kid that would do weird stuff in front of other kids for attention. Climb into bins, eat old food out of the bins, let people throw yogurt over him, dive into bushes, that sort of thing. Otherwise, he seemed mostly harmless. Ended up in prison for pouring a kettle of boiling water over a guy and a girl who he fancied. They were at a house party, he saw her talking to a guy, so he went to the kitchen, boiled the kettle, then calmly walked up to them and poured it over their heads. I'm not sure he had ever even spoken to her, but he was seemingly jealous that she was talking to another guy. Then, after he was released from prison for that, he took his mother's car on a joyride with 2 of his mates, crashed into a car driven by an elderly couple, then ran off, leaving his 2 mates dead and the elderly couple badly injured. I think he's still in prison for that. Not quite as bad, but we had another weird kid who would talk to no one and would spend all day drawing graffiti in a sketchbook, which he guarded with his life. Not good graffiti, he just kept drawing his tag in different fonts. I think it was Azpect, or some other badly spelt word. If he spoke, it was usually just to tell people how great he thought Banksy was. He ended up spraying his tag all over our small and otherwise graffiti-free English town, and was immediately arrested after his old teachers recognized it. I think the sketchbook was used as evidence. He was then arrested a second time for spraying his tag on the side of the courthouse in front of half a dozen CCTV cameras. I bumped into him a year or so back, and now he works for a charity which runs a kids club in the next town over. He teaches kids how to skate and BMX, as well as running street art classes where they legally decorate the skate park with graffiti. I wouldn't say I ran into him, but I occasionally drive past the penny kid walking around slumped in a leather jacket and greasy hair on a hot summer day. I really have no idea what he's doing with his life, but he still seems pretty weird. Back in high school, he was always collecting change that he'd find on the ground, and I found out later he actually saved up $500 or so and donated it to charity. I thought a lot differently about him once I found out. Didn't run into him, but randomly saw a TED Talk he gave on YouTube. He's a physicist now, and has been lobbying the government to increase funding for science education in order to ensure future generations can continue the fight against climate change. He's a way better person than I became. One kid like that died in a car accident senior year. Everyone then pretended they were his best friend and that they were so sad, etc., etc., etc. These people basically tortured this kid. Their reactions were disgustingly fake. I never realized how many phony monsters I knew until that happened. Luckily, I never had to see those people again soon after. She was actually doing really well. I almost didn't recognize her because she looked so much different. She joined the military, so was cleaned up, in better shape, etc., and seemed like she was happy. Sadly, she died in a car accident a year or so later. Girl in high school used to be really to herself, super into anime, just assumed she was shy, so I'd make a point to have small chats with her every day, until one day she said her pillow wasn't screwing her right. Apparently, her pillow had conscience, and she used it to pleasure herself. Graduated a few months later. Fast forward to about 3 months ago. I'm making coffee at a cafe when said girl walks up to me. She's super polite and bubbly, but as I ask how her day is going, she tells me that the demon that forced himself upon her was actually her guardian angel and she needed him around or something. Haven't seen her since. In case somebody needed to be told today, don't stick it in crazy. Ran into the kid who was effectively the school bully at the bank one day. He wasn't a physical bully, but made fun of everyone and was just mean in general. He walks up to me holding his daughter and gave me a classic white guy, well gosh darn it, how the heck are ya? And this is gonna sound crazy, but he legit became the nicest guy in the world. Extremely well adjusted, great family, great career. He invited me to go out to the driving range the following Sunday, and for whatever reason, I was inclined to go. Wound up hitting golf balls and smoking J's with him for most of the day and had a heart-to-heart. Turns out, he was terribly abused his entire life, and his father punished him by forcing him to stay awake all night. He was petrified to go home, so he did whatever he could to get detention. Explains a lot. Never judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. There was a weird kid in my middle school who would eat hand sanitizer, cut his fingers, and write 666 on the classroom walls with his blood, and other creepy things. Apparently, he had a crush on me, and asked me to the 8th grade prom, but I declined. Fast forward to the last day of middle school. I received a message from him on Facebook saying he had a huge crush on me, and that he would off himself if I didn't feel the same. I told him that despite what he had just sent me, I wasn't interested. A few months later, we start high school, but since there's 4 high schools in my area, a lot of us were scattered around, and we ended up going to different schools. I never saw him again, but through Facebook, I saw that he started a relationship with a girl that also attended our middle school. He looked really happy, and honestly, I was happy for him. He seemed to have grown out of that weird middle school stage and genuinely seemed like a great guy. Around 2 years later, I was a junior in high school. I go to a local supermarket and just mind my business. The next day, I receive a message from him on Facebook saying he was working at the supermarket and happened to see me. I messaged him back and apologized for not seeing him and saying hi. He then proceeded to apologize for all of the weird middle school stuff and that message he had sent me on the last day of 8th grade. I told him all was fine and we left it at that. Now, by the looks of his Facebook, he's a workout fanatic and his body has changed a lot. He also seems to be going to college and spends a lot of time with his family. I'm glad he's doing fine. Calmed down significantly and is happily married now. He acted out in school because he was being abused by his foster parents at home. Nobody knew at the time. I don't know, he just keeps making crappy edits of Drew Pickles from the Rugrats going places around town and talking in a text-to-speech voice. That's hyper-specific. There was this kid in junior high that was really quiet and had no friends at the time. One day, my English teacher pulls me out of the classroom and asks me to befriend him because he didn't have friends. So I did, and we became friends. We went to different high schools, so kinda lost connection. He would text me every now and then. He found me on Facebook when he was working on his engineering degree. He is now married and works for SpaceX as an engineer. He renamed himself Green Dragon of the West. He's a network engineer, so okay, I guess. Voice actors note, a lot of these stories are about the weird kid committing heinous crimes that I cannot talk about on YouTube, so apologies if some of these stories turn up a little short. I saw her at a con I was working, where she came up to my guest and was telling him about her book that she hadn't started writing, but was due the next day and still had 10,000 words left to write. She also kept looking at her phone and dramatically sighing and saying things about how she wished her publisher would leave her alone. So, still making up things to try and make herself look better. I'm doing fine and have not murdered anyone. I was the weird kid. Mom was never really around, no father figure. We lived in a half-renovated house with animal feces through it because my mom kept her dogs indoors 24/7. We were also extremely broke. Like, Mom would go hungry to feed my sister and I. My mother, on reflection, was mentally unwell due to the depression of losing her mom 2 years prior. She still hasn't recovered to this day. I realized years later my clothes probably smell like animal feces all the time. I had very few friends in high school. I ended up getting into drugs at 13 to escape from my crappy life, plus I had no boundaries or restrictions from my parental figures. I also lived on my PlayStation and Game Boy due to not having any friends to actually spend time with, making me socially inept. Both my sister and I were eventually uplifted by welfare services, and I ended up in a boys' home for 3 years, where I finally got the boundaries and basic care I needed. I had a great social worker who worked hard to set me up with a positive future despite my circumstances. I slowly gained social skills and realized I could have a normal life. After leaving school, I realized I had a strong work ethic that led me to work up to holding management positions in basically every business I've worked in since my early 20s. It also got me through university doing a Bachelor of Social Work. Now, I'm a social worker, supporting young adults to change the direction of their lives and to have a life they could be proud of. I've just been promoted to manage the service I work for and to grow the service so it could be extended to other districts. I guess I've done alright for myself when I look at where I've come from. I'm also happily married with 3 amazing kids, whom I make my life mission to have a better upbringing than the one I experienced. For those who are asking about my mom and my sister became a semi-pro athlete and also graduated uni. She's in a long-term relationship and has a job that enables her to train for her sporting discipline. Mom's doing okay. She's still not mentally there, but she is better than she was, and she does try most days. She loves the grandkids and spoils them every time she sees them. She's got a job now and has held it down for a few months. Her decision-making is still poor sometimes, but my sister and I keep an eye on her and challenge her decisions when they're not helpful to her quality of life. He's in prison for owning, my lord. Like I said before, can't mention that on YouTube. It's CP, by the way. He was still wearing the same hoodie that he had every single day in high school, 5 years after graduation. I don't know what I'd expected, but it blew my mind. She moved to New York City and was one of the stars of a Broadway musical. See? The weird kid in school can have a successful acting career. Wait a minute, I'm pretty sure I was the weird kid. But runner-up was a very nice but shy girl who immigrated from China and loved computers, but was incredibly meek. A conversation was like prying teeth, would only make strange noises in class, etc. And frankly, in hindsight, what little she said at the time makes me realize now she was in an emotionally abusive household. Example, she had some small role in a school play in middle school. I was happy for her when I saw that her mom came, as she said she doubted her mom would come. I asked afterwards, and she said her mom said she looked like a sack of dog bones on the stage during her part. I legit did not know what to say when she said stuff like that because I was a kid myself. Fortunately, I can say I know how she turned out, and it's a happy ending. We went to the same college, and she was originally signed up for pre-med because even though this gal was a computer whiz, her mom insisted she had to be a doctor. Within a year, though, she rebelled against everything and became a computer science major, the horror, and became a known source of advice for other kids of Asian descent in particular, seeking to stand up to their parents' expectations. She's now a test engineer working for a household name computing company and posts pictures of international travel and various geeky hobbies. So, I guess she was great once she could find herself, and most of the weirdness was imposed upon her. People are asking how I was weird. Unfortunately, while astronomy is a cool thing to be into as an adult, it is not when you're at an all-girls high school. This was combined with how honestly I didn't know how to interact with a lot of the other kids. I wasn't shy, but had real trouble making friends. Was very ostracized in elementary school too, like kid who sat alone at lunch for years, and didn't figure it out until college. I've told this before, but my dad told me about a kid he went to high school with who used to sit in the back of the class mumbling and giggling to himself all the time. Occasionally, he'd pick his nose and eat the results. Despite this, my dad said, he was apparently really smart and got all A's. He told me the guy's name, and since it was pretty distinctive, I looked him up online. He was a federal appeals court judge. Wow, my dad has a similar high school story. I promise that my recollection of this is true, but my father may have embellished some bits, though I don't see why he would. Back when my father was in high school, he had several classes with the weird kid/outcast. Always kept to himself and had trouble making friends because he wasn't engaging in conversations like most people are. Not that he wouldn't socialize, but rather, he only socialized when necessary, and to him, it was a means to an end. For context, the story was told like a decade ago. And that kid was Tom Cruise. I did verify, they indeed went to the same high school together, and were in the same year. So, take from that what you will. It's been 7 years and he still messages me on Facebook once a week. I haven't spoken to him or replied in 7 years, and he sends me paragraphs of text. I see it as a dang game now. Freaking 7 years. What the heck, Mark? It's only a couple years out of high school at this point, but one of my good friends is high-functioning autistic, and thus was considered very weird in high school. He's found a job stocking the refrigerators at a local supermarket and is enjoying that from what he tells me. He's taking classes on and off at a local university, but doesn't know what he wants to go into. He's also getting into writing fanfiction and is continuing his passion for Lego. On a side note, his creations in Lego are super impressive, especially considering his limited resources. He discovered that he was better at interacting with computers than with people and became a software engineer. Ran into him at Costco, wrapping up a PhD at 25. Not bad at all. There was a girl at my school who I'll call Melanie. Melanie was easily the most socially awkward/unaware girl I've ever met. Like, pleasuring herself at school awkward, picking her nose and eating it publicly awkward. By the end of high school, she had figured out how not to do these insane things that made people stare and laugh at her, but needless to say, she had a rough go. But she was also one of those people who was a really nice, genuine person. I moved away after college and didn't have Facebook until at least 10 years after graduation, so I had no idea what most of my classmates were doing. Maybe 5 years ago, I spotted her and friended her. She ended up marrying this guy who went to our school and was maybe 3 years older than us. I knew him from work, and he asked me out at one point. He was also really, really nice, but super nerdy and socially awkward. I didn't think about it at the time, but when I saw she married him, I was like, oh my god, they're perfect for each other. They moved to a state that has a bunch of mountains and they don't have any children, so they're always posting all these amazing hiking and rock climbing adventures they're doing together. They go to all kinds of festivals together. Renaissance, I think, Star Trek, horror, etc. They look super happy, and I talked to her grandma last year, who told me they're as happy as clams. I'm just so happy for her. The type of weird that you wanted to have as a friend rather than not. I have a few too many stories with this kid in middle/high school. He was a kleptomaniac, had illegal, exotic, and dangerous pets, obsession with knives and weapons, had no regard for normal social standards and cues. Despite him being an innately skilled entrepreneur, he was a general menace to society. I went off to college and later learned his home was raided by ATF. His father had been manufacturing automatic weapons for the Latin kings, and they charged him on an unregistered gun and pot/shroom chocolates found in his room. Last I heard of him after he got out of prison was on a flyer for a community board advertising basic around the house labor, with his head superimposed on a cartoon Superman. I met him at a bus stop, and I only managed to say, "Hey, how are you? What are you doing nowadays?" He responded, "I'm a cat, meow, meow," and ran away across the road, where he almost got hit by a car in the process. I didn't see him come back to take a bus. I suppose he turned into a furry or something? He is so much happier than he was in high school, where people would physically assault him, harass him, and mock him. He has autism and is obsessed with Batman and sharks. The last time I saw him was 2 years ago when I was walking around my friend's college, and he was delighted to see me, and even remembered my name where we caught up. And he told me all about how he had been on vacation and got to go out on a boat and see sharks. I mean, Batman and sharks are both pretty freaking rad. Still weird. Not as weird as in high school when he invited me over to have frozen pizzas and watch Animal Planet, the original Netflix and chill. He asked every single day in science class, without fail. Then he wiped his bugs on the front of my desk. We had a kid who thought he was a ninja. He even wore the shoes with the split toes. Ended up getting busted talking 12-year-old girls online into favors at a local park. While awaiting trial, was busted by internet vigilantes posing as underage girls going after multiple faked accounts. His trial was on the news quite a bit. About 10 years later, there was an expose on conditions at a prison, and he was interviewed working out in the yard. Few years after his release, a news crew knocked on his door for one of those kitty diddlers in your neighborhood do you know where they are segments. One of the kids from back in school has a very nice compilation of all these segments. At a 10-year-old high school reunion, met up with two guys. One who was captain of the football team, always had the hot chicks, you know the type. The other who had been a painfully shy and awkward nerd that was shunned and made fun of. Overheard the conversation when the nerd instigated it with Mr. Football, which went something like this. "Hey, what have you been doing with yourself?" Mr. Football said he was in the Navy, I forget the rank, and was a cook at the Brig, aka Navy Jail. Nerd replied, "Hey, I joined the Navy too." He went on to very humbly say he was a lieutenant commander, fighter pilot, and was working on his PhD in some sort of engineering field. He walked off. True revenge of the nerd. I thought this was going to end in one of those and everybody clapped stories, but I'm glad this was more believable. Just saw a guy who ran with the weird crowd at my school. They were the anime manga type crowd, but I always respected them for doing what they enjoyed. He approached me at the local gym. A very polite, respectful guy always, and I found out that he was working and playing in 2 bands. I'm glad he came up to me, and I'm extremely glad he's doing what he loves to do. Let people do what they do, as they'll probably let you do what you love to as well. He's still my friend, still weird, just a bit more mature. I think he'll be single forever though. He gets girls, but never long term. He's just too unique. It will have to be a very certain person. Those words are doing a lot of heavy lifting there. I'm not sure you trust that kid at all. Weird, but always mad and very strong. My dad sent me a newspaper clipping some years ago. He was around 40 and at a country and western nightclub when 3 men in their 20s jumped him in the parking lot. He then went inside and told the bar owner that he'd been jumped in his parking lot. He then told him to call the police and to make sure an ambulance was called because they were hurt badly. "Call an ambulance, but not for me." I dated the weird kid in middle school, but he moved away and we lost contact. We reconnected when I was in college. He dropped out of high school and was kind of lost in life. He'd gotten 2 girls pregnant and was working 3 jobs to pay child support. He flirted heavily with me when we talked, and I decided it wasn't worth the baggage and politely stepped out of his life. Last I heard, he became a skinhead and joined an alt-right faction in Oklahoma. This is a certified 0 to 100 moment. I was a weird kid. The way I would put it is, if I were born 10 to 15 years later, I probably would have been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. I was smart, emotionally precocious, but I had a lot of strange coordination and motor control issues. For me, playing looked like collecting or sorting piles of things from the backyard or lining up my toys in height order. Never had many friends, dressed like a dork, had trouble fitting in. I was awkward, teased, and bullied into late middle school. I grew out of it somehow. I don't really remember there being any process. I like to think that I grew into myself. I got good social skills. I'm relatively attractive, and people like me. Still have some weird idiosyncrasies, but I'm cool enough to own them nowadays. My childhood and adolescence still influence a lot of my fears, but overall, I'm glad to be who I am now, and growing up was important for that to happen. Let me introduce you to Josh. Josh was a strange boy in both looks and demeanor. Clearly, he was from a poor background, which stood out in school because the overall demographic of the school was middle to upper middle class. So Josh shows up on the first day, slightly grubby looking, barely able to write his own name at 11 years old and looking like he wanted to punch a wall. He quickly made a name for himself, acting up in class, being tardy, and generally being a bit of a nuisance. He'd disrupt lessons, he'd lash out at other students, and he had a clear anger problem. Josh became an easy target for bullies because he would react to their bullying, usually by throwing a chair. It's fair to say, Josh had little to no friends. We were a tutor group of about 27 to 30, depending on people coming and going. Not a particularly tight-knit, but we had bonded over a couple things. A girl who'd had a brush with death was our tutor. One of our tutors left partway through the year. By year 9, we, for the most part, began to tolerate Josh. Josh, as a result, became more trusting and calmed down. He still had a heck of a temper and he was still an easy target, but he began to try and socialize a bit more. One day, it was a rainy lunchtime, and he came and sat with a group of us, all from the same tutor group. We asked him how he was, and he disclosed to us that his mom's new boyfriend had been showing him homosexual adult images. We, of course, being 13 to 14, didn't really know what to say or how to react, but there was a resounding consensus that that was not normal. He'd hinted at a very, very unhappy home life before. In hindsight, I don't know why any of the teachers didn't pick up on it when things he had mentioned were such a safeguarding risk. The more and more Josh disclosed, more of how miserable his home life was, how abused he was, the more respect we had for him. He didn't know anything other than violence. He had never been shown love or respect. He had never been given the opportunity to better himself. Over time, we became very, very protective of Josh. The cool boys in our tutor group would step into fights to defend him. We'd all keep an eye out for him when he was walking home, etc. I saw Josh about a year ago. I caught a glimpse of him in the street and shouted his name. He came running over and gave me the biggest bear hug ever. He told me he'd been working really hard on himself and that he was hoping to get a job in the local comic book shop where he spends hours and hours reading. He seemed genuinely happy and like he'd escaped his abusive background. Honestly, I wish him the absolute best, and I hope he finds both happiness and stability. Last time I saw him, he was running across campus, although he wasn't late for class. He did this in high school all the time. I caught his attention and we walked and chatted. He was my friend in high school. He's doing great. Weird is good. Weird hugging girl. Just saw her about a month ago. She's a teacher now and living the American dream. I can tell her favorite teacher was also mine. She operates just like him. She's on a successful path. Homeboy, whose parents adopted him for the tax break, is happily married with children. He found love and despite everything going against him, is successful. High school students of Reddit, just because they're that kid does not mean they are not human. Be humble. We've all been that kid. Redditors who lost their job because of a post to a social media platform. What happened? I've recently come into contact with a few people who lost their job over a Facebook-type social media outlet post, and it got me wondering, what kind of jobs take social media posts so seriously? I worked customer support for a mobile game company. I was honest with a disheartened customer who had complained that recent changes had made the game pay to win. It had, in truth, been a glitch with an update. I told them as much, assuring them the team would be fixing it in the next update. But then the game's profits skyrocketed. The team kept the glitch and put out a statement describing the change as an intentional one designed to improve the play experience. But there was my name, plastered all over the game forums, claiming the opposite. I technically worked for a separate company that provided support for several studios, but the studio behind this game was our biggest customer. They approached my bosses, furious that I jeopardized their cash cow, and demanded I be fired. I promptly became familiar with the underside of the bus as I was gone within the week. TLDR, worked customer support for mobile games, told truth, went viral-ish, fired. Didn't lose my job, but I watched a friend lose his over a tweet. He tweeted, "So getting head while delivering pizzas is pretty sweet," one night while he was working. The next morning, he tweeted, "Yo, screw you, Papa John's. I don't need you or your stupid job anyway," or something to that effect. I've never laughed so hard in my life. I used to work for Geek Squad in college, and a coworker was fired when a famous actor came in and she posted on Facebook a lot of his private info. Like full name came into her store and bought this and has a black Amex card and stuff he had on his computer. Not once, but on 2 separate occasions. Worked at GameStop until 2010. The store was in a mall, and parents would always leave their kids in the store and go do their shopping. Sometimes the children would cry, sometimes they'd pee themselves, even had one number 2. Parents would get mad at us for not bringing them to the bathroom, what the heck? Or start screaming at their kids for not just playing games for a few hours without causing any problems. I tweeted about how the store wasn't there to babysit children and never really thought about that tweet again. Until, a few months later, same thing. Parent drops kid off in store, leaves. 20 minutes later, an older-looking guy is outside the store, on his flip phone, aiming it at the store. He's creeping me out, but I continue offering pointless warranties to customers while waiting for my next break, and then I noticed him walk near the entrance of the store and ask that kid where his parents are. This seemed really fishy, and the guy looked beyond suspicious. I was thinking he could be a kitty diddler, and I was right. He gets the kid to go with him, I call up mall security so they could check it out, and they caught him before he left the mall. He was arrested. The kid was crying, asking for his mom, who mall security could not reach because, as it turns out, she went to some stores outside of the mall area and she didn't actually come back for another 2 hours, at which point she threatened to sue me, GameStop, the mall, etc. Security guard lady told her that child services were called. They all walked away. That was the last time I saw them. Few days later, district manager, DM, shows up in store and I was fired on the spot because that lady made a complaint. DM found my Twitter and informed me that my approach to yesterday's dilemma and my tweet about how GameStop isn't a babysitting service has made them believe that I don't have the, quote, GameStop spirit. Both the manager and district manager told me I could use them as a reference on my resume though, which was great until they both lost their jobs a few weeks later. A former colleague of mine posted about how he was going to use up all his sick leave and then quit. He posted it at 9 a.m. He was told he had no more job at 11. I was working as a bartender and server for a place. The assistant manager was a petty tyrant and treated the staff like crap. I had made several complaints about him to the general manager and the owner with some of the other staff, but they refused to do anything about it. So I was done with this place and was currently looking for a new job when one day I was bartending and a very young-looking girl came. She hands me her out-of-state ID and I can tell that it is fake. I politely tell her that I can't serve her alcohol and explain that in this state we don't legally have to accept out-of-state IDs, blah blah blah. She was actually very understanding and there was no scene or issue. Her other friends arrive and they move to a table, and I inform their server about the fake ID. It is around this time that the assistant manager, who had been drinking Bloody Marys at the bar next door all morning and then napping in the office, came over. He then starts telling me that I don't know what a fake ID looks like and I don't have the right to refuse service and how stupid I am. He then tells me I have to serve the girl. I inform him that I have the legal right to refuse service and he cannot force me to. Anyway, I go home and post on Facebook about my day, and then include a photo of when I was managing a liquor store holding a device of medieval defense made out of all the fake IDs we had confiscated in 1 year. Also, a crown. The next day, I was called in and let go for refusing to cooperate with management and what have you. TLDR, got fired for posting a sweet picture of me wearing a crown and holding a shield of fake IDs. Not me, but the company I work for. A prospective employee just passed his interview and was told that all he needs to do is pass a drug test and a physical and he would start on Monday. The company Facebook guy found the new hire on Facebook and the guy had just posted 20 minutes after the interview, "Crap, anyone know how to pass a drug test in 24 hours?" I was younger and an idiot. I posted something on Facebook about wanting to go home and play The Sims so I could create telecommunications store I worked for on it and then slowly kill off all the customers. I was working a late night shift in a mall and forgot our new coworker had added me on Facebook days before. Joined a game studio alongside a guy who just finished his philosophy degree. He felt that the game's official forums were the best place to discuss whether disabled people would be, quote, of as much value as pigs after a post-apocalyptic event, and if they should be simply slaughtered and eaten, all using his company account, of course. I don't even know where to begin with this. I don't have the mental or physical capacity to give this guy the verbal beatdown he so desperately deserves. And probably physical beatdown too while we're at it. I was let go from the nation's third largest insurance company for what were called offensive tweets. Apparently, someone with my similar name was tweeting vulgar things to comedy accounts, and they brought me into HR and terminated me. Yes, I sued for wrongful termination so I could finish getting my MBA. I was once passed over for a job because I barely use Facebook. They straight up told me that they couldn't trust me because of how little info was on my page. For future reference, I'm sorry employers that 90% of my Facebook page is related to StarCraft and/or miscellaneous gaming. I'm sorry that I don't get drunk and post embarrassing photos of things you could fire me over. My personal life is my business and not Facebook's.
You must construct additional profiles. We require more discreditable posts.
A company I worked for had it written into their 7-page contracts that you were not allowed to even reference said company on social media. Anyone in breach would be fired instantly. There's a page on Facebook called We Hate Blank that's currently one of the world's biggest corporate hate pages. It all started when someone working in our call center posted online about how much the customers suck. They began something of a war between the staff and customers posting on employees' walls and vice versa. The company was/is a major player in its market, essentially had a monopoly, and there was a noticeable drop in sales that year. All in all, around 20 people were fired. I work in a hospital, and there was a police shooting in my area a couple of years ago, and multiple officers were brought into our ER. One officer was dead on arrival, and a number of idiot hospital employees posted condolences on their Facebook pages with the name of the officer before the family was officially informed. If memory serves, 7 or 8 employees were rightfully fired for that one. It's amazing to hear all of the healthcare blunders. I work in an ICU and saw a pretty messed up violation of patient privacy. A nurse was trying to contact the wife of a patient of ours, but somehow got his ex-wife. The ex-wife lost her mind on the nurse and started demanding information. When we finally got a hold of the wife, it turns out that the patient has a restraining order on the ex-wife due to a bunch of issues and told us not to release any information. We marked the patient as confidential so she wouldn't be able to find him. The ex-wife kept calling us saying she knew he was still in there, what room number he was in, and other information that we never provided her. We were wondering how the ex-wife knew all of this, and how her name was listed as the next of kin. It turns out that her friend worked in the admitting department in the same hospital, and she was the one that A, updated the contact information, she apparently checks on his patient file constantly, and B, kept logging into one of our systems and released his health information, such as tests he's had, results to lab work, and reading history/transfer/discharge reports once the ex-wife told her that he was admitted to our unit. They apparently did this all the time whenever the ex-wife found out that her ex-husband was in our hospital for any reason. After a couple days of proper investigation, the admitting clerk was let go and fined for improperly accessing patient information/release of information. She basically killed her career for her friend, as we basically only have one healthcare entity in our area. Not me, but a girl on my Facebook worked for the postal service in my town. She posted on Facebook how she wanted to slit her boss's throat and went into some pretty gory details. Then, about 5 hours later, she posted another status about how the feds showed up at her house and that one of her coworkers had showed her boss the status and she was now fired. She's obviously really dumb and trashy. I had to fire an employee for a tweet he wrote about a customer. He tweeted, "Customer's full name would be a great name for a gay adult film star." I found out about it when the customer's lawyer called me the next day threatening action. Turns out the guy worked for the local newspaper and obsessively searched his name on all social media. A little over a year ago, a bunch of employees at my old job got a rash. It wasn't contagious, our blood was clean, and the doctors were confused. I took steroids from day 1 and had it for a little over 2 weeks, I believe. I didn't even have it as bad as a couple people. Everyone continued to work, even though some people had it in exposed areas. Employees were itching and talking about it, but management did nothing. Even the manager had it, but the owner didn't, so he didn't care to take any action. Well, I posted a picture of my rash on Reddit and gave absolutely no information on where I worked. It got to the front page of r/WTF and a coworker saw it and obviously recognized it. He showed people because he thought it was funny, but there was a coworker already out to get me and she was close with our manager. So they told the manager that I had posted the picture on Facebook, which obviously would have been a big deal. So the manager told me to leave, but said she would have the owner meet with me. I knew as soon as I got home that she wasn't going to tell the owner to contact me. But I was already planning to quit the next weekend, so I didn't bother to meet with him. I am not working at a place that allows the majority of their staff to get a rash and not investigate it. I should probably add that this was a restaurant. Not me, but my mom's ex-boyfriend. He was a waiter at a very elite restaurant and had normally expected very nice tips. Some guy left him a $5 tip for an over $100 bill, and he got angry and posted the customer's information on Facebook. He got fired the next day. Wow, this blew up. It seems some people are making some pretty bad assumptions. So he was actually a very good waiter. High-end restaurants really wanted him. It probably went to his head at some point because he started to pick up a drinking/staying out late after work habit. He started having some issues with my mom as well, and they became roommates only. My mom moved out and he got really stressed, and I heard from his prior manager that he started getting strikes at work. He also frequently ranted on Facebook about bad customers. A while later, he posted the customer's info on Facebook and was fired. From what I know now, he's got a job at a bar, but is still drinking. He wasn't a bad guy by any means. He just started losing himself and making really bad choices. My mom still keeps in contact with his family, but from what I hear, it's still bad. I had to fire someone for one. He was a volunteer firefighter and left for a call, which I allowed. 15 minutes later, someone showed me his 5-minute-old post of him riding quads, saying something along the lines of, "Sometimes you just need to F off from work." That put him on a final warning. He then left because he said his house was on fire. Then half an hour later, his wife tagged him in a photo of him sitting in a kiddie pool in front of the house. The funny thing is, in both cases, if he had simply asked to leave early, I probably would have said yes. To clarify, this was over a few different days, a few weeks apart, and he worked for me, but also volunteered as a firefighter. The fire chief also found out about this and dismissed him from that position as well. This guy had a few issues, needless to say, and honesty was not something with which he was familiar. My dad was in a similar position. The guy asked to leave early, my dad said yes. Then a half hour later, the guy posted that he was in the emergency room. We later learned that it was because he tore his urethra after he stuck a screwdriver in there. Edit. It was a Phillips. Oh my god, why is that so important to everyone? Okay. Reddit? Hi. It's me, the guy reading these posts. Don't stick things in your dingling where they don't belong. I remember reading about a guy who shoved a caulk gun up there one time, and I still cringed just as hard. So dingling havers of Reddit, please take care of yourselves because I don't want to have to read more about your trauma. It costs $0 to be nice to yourself. My female friend, 18, was DM'd through Twitter by the news presenter, 37, of our city. He was talking about her beach pictures and how she is really pretty and how they need to get together. She ended up telling him that it's pretty ridiculous that he's trying to get with her. He lost his job later that week. The only real reason he lost his job was because he used the Weather Channel's Twitter account. Oh, this happened to me many years ago. I was on the job a week at a law firm and had to ride with one of the female employees to the UPS store. She was a terrible driver and almost wrecked multiple times. I posted on Facebook, 1 week on the job and my coworker is trying to kill me. Worst driver ever. The next day, I was called into my boss's office with the girl sitting there with an expressionless look on her face, and there was a printout of my post. It was awkward and they fired me on the spot. All of my account information was also set to private, so they figured out a way to check my activity. Former Chipotle manager here. As many of you know, Chipotle gives away free crap on Halloween, so it's a mandatory weekend for everyone to work. Well, one of our employees called off that Thursday saying he had swine flu. Right. Of course, he posted pictures of his weekend partying on his Facebook, upon which he was friends with our kitchen manager, general manager, and district manager. Per company policy and common freaking sense, you can't return to work from serious contagious stuff without a doctor's note. So he shows back up on Wednesday acting all fine and saying the doc cleared him. Oh, but his mom threw his release note away. Too bad, buddy. We need that crap or you can't work. Since we didn't know when he would have it, we only gave him 1 day on the schedule anyway. So then his mommy calls me and asks why he can't work. I ask her if she went to a restaurant and found out a cook hadn't proven he was clear from having swine flu, would she eat there? She saw my point. But it's not his fault she threw away the note. They were remodeling. I asked, why can't the dog write a new one? Well, he went on vacation. Couldn't the receptionist or a PA get them something? She huffed and hung up on me. The next day he puts on Facebook, "Dear Chipotle and managers, instead of cutting hours on someone, why not grow the freaking balls to fire them outright? Suck my dingaling." Pretty easy to let him go after that. I got fired from an internship for posting on Reddit before. It was a very small environmental engineering consulting firm. We were doing work on a site that had lead and arsenic contamination on it. The site was very dusty, and if it didn't rain for a few days, the dust would often kick up and blow onto the street next to the site, which happened to be the main road in this semi-smallish town. Someone mentioned on Reddit, in a totally unrelated way, that they were from this town. I made a mention of the contamination and told the dude that if he ever saw dust coming off the site that he should contact the engineers which were housed above one of the local bars. Apparently, this guy didn't really want the site to be redeveloped at all because of the already high congestion in the surrounding roads, and he called and complained and mentioned my post on Reddit. The company was so small it was obvious it was me who posted it, and I fessed up about what I had said and immediately deleted the post. Even though I didn't do anything illegal or even remotely immoral, I was fired because I was seen as a liability. Screw that. People deserve to know if the dust they're breathing in could give them cancer. I moved on to a different field, marine biology, and haven't even remotely looked back. Content warning, good old-fashioned racism ahead. A girl I know was a nurse at a hospital and got fired for posting things on Facebook such as, "So sleepy here in the ICU. Will someone please code and give me something to do? Hashtag, is that bad? I'm not trying to offend anyone, but I have to ask. Is it like a Native American custom not to take a dump at home? Is it like an offense to their husbands to dump at home? Every time I go into a public bathroom and it smells like someone died in there, a native is washing their hands. Literally every single time. Like, lay off the Navajo tacos." The dumbest part about it was she was tagging the hospital she worked at in her posts. If you have to start your post with, "I'm not trying to offend anyone, but," there's a good chance you're probably going to offend someone. Or just straight up be offensive under the guise of asking questions. I remember hearing a story about a young teacher in my province getting fired for posting vacation pictures to Facebook. Bikini, margaritas. A dipstick parent or teacher reported it, as any uptight group of PTA mothers would want to defend young eyes from that. "Oh, we can't have our children gazing upon such heresy. Having fun, enjoying yourself, it brings torment to the soul. Oh!" I didn't get fired, but I did get written up for a post on Facebook. It was about 5 years ago at my old job. Spring just started, and it was the first day it was in the 60s. On lunch, I posted something like, "What a beautiful day. Can't wait to get out of work and enjoy it." Well, that didn't go over well. Funny thing is, I wasn't Facebook friends with anyone from work. They had one guy that would creep on people's Facebooks. This is when I learned about privacy settings. He told the boss, and I got pulled in the office. They basically asked why I didn't like my job and why I couldn't wait to get out of work. I was like, it's the first warm day in what feels like 6 months. Of course I want to be outside. The reason I got written up was because I was, quote, on Facebook at work, even though I was on lunch. Bunch of idiots worked at that place. It's kind of surprising how delusional bosses are. "Oh no, he might want to get off work and enjoy a nice day. Call him in! We must investigate what it means to be human!" When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.